then you would like to know the reaction. So we have to know what will be the future of Afghan people in Europe. Yeah,
thank you. We will deal with that in the next panel.
Short.
In the next panel, we deal with that issue.
Sorry, you will get your answer in the next panel. I just want to say, give me 2 minutes that we will start. I'm sorry to everyone, with all respect for you brothers and sisters. We don't have so much time, or we could sit down here and discuss all month about that. Well, we have a lot of questions and messages from other Afghan society here. But we have one society who have questions, and they are comments for us for today. So I will say that they are coming up here and telling us about that comment from the Afghan society.
اگر گستاخانه شما حساب نکنید گپ مرا گوش کنید.
بله.
برنامه را که شما اعلام کردید هیچ گونه سناریو نداشت. چه وقت تفریز، چه وقت ما سوال بکنیم،
بله.
چه وقت ما جواب میدیم. کسانی که اینجا آمدن ما به خاطر نمیدیم که اونا حرفای مقبول بگوین ما بشنویم. برای ما احترام گذاشته شود، برای ما وقت داده شود که ما در دل خودم بگوییم، نظر خودم بگوییم. من هیچ نظر نگفتم. یک سوال کوتاه قطع نشه. این درست نیست. این احترام نیست برای ما. ما اینجا آمدیم با موجودیت ما احترام شود. برنامه خودم منظم بسازیم، کوتاه بسازیم، وقتشون تعیین بکنیم، تفریح بهتون تعیین بکنیم، وقت سوارا بسیار تعیین بکنیم، وقت جواب تعیین بکنیم. ما احترام میگذاریم. ما به خاطر نیستیم که حرفای قشنگ بسیار بنسون الکسون بشنویم.
ببخشید.
ما این معلومات رو قبلا داریم قبلا.
ببخشید بیشتر حاضرینی که در اینجا هستن بعضی مشکلاتی که میخوام بیان بکنم راهکارهایی است که در جامعه اروپا یا در جامعه سویدن وجود داره و راهکارش هم میخوام که جستجو کنم. مهمانی که در پنل اول هستن مهمانی هستن که از افغانستان آمدن و به هر حال تمام مواردی را که سوال میشن ازشان بیشتر در مورد افغانستان هست و سیاست‌هایی که در اونجا هست که خود ما میفهمیم که افغانستان هم به هر حال چندان کاری نخواهد کرد در این زمین. ولی منتظر باشین، از همگی خواهان این است که صبر داشته باشن، پنل دوم هم گوش کنن. به این دلیل که بیشتر سوالایی که امیال خودتون داریم و داشتیم بیشتر در پنل دوم گفتن بشه. راهکارهایی که به هر صورت اروپا و کشورهای اروپایی
امیر اول اعلام میکنید شما میفهمیدید. امیر اول شما درشوی برنامه میگفتید.
و یک چیز دیگه که در کاغذ نوشته شده.
با عذر معذرت به خاطری که کنفرانس تقریبا اول در سویدن بود و برنامه ریزی یکم اشتباهاتی درش واقع شده. خب ما کوشش بهتر خود میکنیم که آینده کنفرانس های خوبتر شود و اجنده پروگرام هم در صفحه ما بخش شده بود. بله دیگه خب انشالله که برنامه آینده ما خوبتر خواهد بود و کل اجنده ما هم در صفحه سایت وبسایت ما بود و هم که صبحی آمدین براتون داده شدن که اونجا میتونید بخوانید کدام پنل چه وقت شروع میشه و چه وقت بریک است، چون که همیشه بحث افغانا بسیار گرم میباشه. بریکا اما تو رفت و همه گیشیشتن صحبت کردن. It was just a little problematic about the program today. So we are discussing that it's our first program here in Sweden and it has been no break just because always when Afghans are together, so there will be no break, just discussions. So I will just say the Afghan Society Union West, they have any comments for us today. Well, we have Afghan Association. It's a lot of messages we have gathered for today from a lot of people that we cannot read it or reach to read all that messages. But one of them was from Sympatisten där Solidaritetspartiet med svensk och norsk alltid kraschar. Afghanistan and Europa. The address you will get in Germany, so you will say that. So we have just one comment from them. So we could say that they have started for such a group here in Europa. Now we will start the second panel, and I just want to say I was not prepared for this conference. I had just 5 minutes to prepare me, so sorry if it's any problems from me. Yeah. So now he will read the message.
با عرض سلام با همه مهمانان عزیز و گرداننده پروگرام رهبری فارو ما پیام از حزب بستگی افغانستان از داخل افغانستان دارم که خدمت شما تقدیم میکنم. درود به کمیته رهبری فارو و مهمانان حاضر در کنفرانس. با اظهار تهنیت از برگزاری کنفرانس سالانه 2016 فدراسیون سازمان پناهندگان افغان در اروپا فارو پیرامون وضعیت هولناک پناهجویان در کشورهای اروپایی، امیدوارم کنفرانس حاضر گام ملموسی برای دفاع از حقوق مردمان باشد که برای نجات از مصائب و آلام تحمیل شده از سوی قدرت‌های امپریالیستی و دستنشاندگان داخلیشان در جستجوی پناهگاه امن با فجایع باور نکردنی مواجه‌اند. سرازیر شدن پناهجویان به اروپا به خصوص از افغانستان، سوریه و عراق برخواسته از بحران است که با اشغال مستقیم و غیر مستقیم کشورهای امپریالیستی به رهبری امریکا و ناتو آغاز شد. جنگ، کشتار، زندان، تجاوز جنسی، فقر و بیکاری مردمان این کشورها را واداشته است تا برای نجات جان و یافتن لقمنان راههای پرخطری را در پیش گرفته به مناطق امن پناه برند. از سوی دیگر سرمایه‌داران هم در شکار این نیروهای ارزان نشستند تا از مجبوریت و سیه‌روزی آنان سوء استفاده نموده و از آنان من حیث برده‌های مدرن در بدترین شرایط معیشتی کار کشند. از سوی دیگر این نیروی بیکار زمینه خوبی برای باندهای جنایتکار تا از آنان در قاچاق مواد مخدر، فحشا و جنایت دیگر استفاده نمایند. دولت اشغالگر امریکا و ناتو زیر نام صدور دموکراسی و آزادی زنان به افغانستان یورش آوردند. ولی امروز با گذشت 15 سال وضعیت بدتر از قبل گردیده. دولت ملا مافیایی بر کشور حکم روایی میکند که متشکل از جانیان گذشته است. دستان خونین دولت‌های مستبد و ارتجاعی ایران و پاکستان تا آرنج در تار و پود کشور فرو رفته است. طالبان و داعش در بیش از 25 ولایت کشور حضور قوی دارند. انتحار و انفجار همه روزه جان دهات تن از هموطنان ما را میگیرد. گلبودین غلام ISI و حزبش بجای محاکمه در ارگ ریاست جمهوری پذیرایی میشوند. بنیادگرایان از سوی امریکا، پاکستان بنیادگرایان از سوی امریکا، انگلستان و کشورهای منطقه حمایت گردیده و قوی‌تر می‌گردند. زنان و دخترکان این سرزمین گوش و گلو بریده شده مورد تجاوز جنسی قرار می‌گیرند و یا در محضر عام سنگسار و شلاق می‌خورند. دزدان مفسدان دولتی بجای محاکمه بر پست‌های بلند دولتی لم می‌دهند. بیشتر از 3 میلیون جوان افغان در مرگ تدریجی احتیاط جان می‌دهند. جوانان از فرط فقر و بیکاری دست به خودکشی می‌زنند و 13 میلیون انسان بیکار سرگردانند. شهرهای بزرگ کشور مملو از کودکان دستفروش و خیابانی است. مکتب و کلینیک‌های خیالی سراسر افغانستان را فرا گرفته است و صدها فاجعه دردناک دیگر. فرار از بدبختی‌ها راه حل نیست و باید علیه آن مبارزه نمود. شاید عده معدودی به زندگی بهتری دست یابند، ولی سرنوشت متبقی چه خواهد شد؟ پس این رسالت افراد و نیروهای پیشرو است که در کنار مردمشان مانده برای آگاهی و بسیج آنان پایکار نمایند. مردم افغانستان با دو دشمن خطرناک، امپریالیسم و بنیادگرایی اسلامی، مواجه‌اند که دومی در سطح منطقه نیز حامیان قوی دارد. این دو پشت روی یک سکن و بدون شکست آن نمیتوان به دموکراسی واقعی، عدالت و خوشبختی رسید. اما خوشبختانه ملت ما هر دو متنفر و بیزارند. نیروهای ملی و مترقی وظیفه دارند که در بسیج و سمدهی مردم نقش ادا کرده جنبش پرخروش ضد بنیادگرایی و ضد امپریالیستی را راه اندازی کنند. این فقط با خودگذری پا نهادن به منافع شخصی و ایستادن در کنار تیره‌روزترین لایه‌های جامعه میسر است و بس. حزب همبستگی افغانستان به تشکل‌های ملی و مترقی و مردمی خارج از کشور تاکید می‌ورزند تا با استفاده از فضای باز کشورهای اروپایی برای آگاهی دهی و بسیج به خصوص جوانان به خانمان افغان تلاش ورزند. امیدوارم کار برای پناهجویان فقط در سطح برگزاری کنفرانس ها و سخنرانی ها باقی نمانده و بیشتر جنبه ملموس و عملی را به خود بگیرد. باید با دوستان کردستان مقیم اروپا در تماس شده و از تجارب گرانبهای آنها آموخت. ما قویاً معتقدیم که نیروهای آزادیخواه و مترقی کشور فقط در همبستگی و همکاری با هم است که میتوانند مشت محکمی بر دهان خائنان ملی و اشغالگران خارجی گردند. با امید برقراری افغانستان آزاد، مستقل و عاری از لوث بنیادگرایی. تشکر از همتان.
خب آل پانلیست دوم ما شروع میشه که مدراتور Lotta Hedström, former parliament and party leader, spokesperson for the Swedish Green Party, former member and chairperson of Swedish Committee for Afghanistan. Lotta Hedström پنل دوم پیش میبرن و یکیشان میان اینجا. شما سوالات را داخل کرده میتونین دیگه. انشالله که براتون این پنل دوم هم خوب تیر شود و یگان چیزا را از هم دیگه بیاموزیم.
Tashakor. So, friends, I'm supposed to be moderating this second panel, and it's about 1 hour after schedule. But I think we will be able to keep our time, because during the luncheon I really urged my panelists to keep their presentation short in order to have more time for this kind of maybe little debate, but also questions and answers afterwards. So I hope we can manage to do that. And what is interesting, I think, is that there are many issues that are overlapping on the refugee issue as such, but also between the panels. So there are many threads left open for us to take over, isn't it? So I hope we can make people satisfied. But before that, let me say a few words of the things that I'm burning for. So right now, just while I'm speaking, in my house in South Sweden, Skåne, this very day, 3 very young Afghan boys have just been waking up and having their breakfast. They are late at mornings. Yesterday evening, they gathered there in our house. They saw movies, they took a bicycle ride in our neighborhood, they cooked bulani, and they baked a Swedish cake. This is my own extra son, who came to me in November last year, Yahya, and his classmates Asib and Mohammed, all 14 years of age, and enjoying me and my husband's trust for managing a Friday, Saturday on their own without us at home. I'm not sure I would trust all Swedish 14 years old teenagers to do that. But these young men, they all came to Sweden less than 1 year back. And it's been a tremendous time watching how both themselves, our village, my region, Skåne, and my municipality, Tomelilla, as well as the Swedish national politics, have been able to deal with these lovely young boys and their situation during this historical time. There have been ups and downs, I can assure you, and 1 step forward and 2 steps back on behalf of the society. But if you ask me, 2 steps forward and only 1 step back on behalf of the boys. Me, myself, after being deeply involved with refugees and their issues for many years, I have not been able to understand so much of what it's like to flee and strand in quite another part of the world, as I've been now as a family extra mother for an Afghan refugee this winter. Not as an activist, hiding refugees, not as a parliamentarian, not as a member some years of the advisory board of the Swedish Migration Authority, or nor as a lobbyist, as I was a few years back for the Red Cross refugee trauma centers, or not even right now when I'm chairing our integrational council in my own municipality, Tomelilla. But as an extra mother to a young, vulnerable, slightly confused, but hoping, dreaming, dancing, playing, studying Afghan teenage boy, I have learned a lot. So let me say and explain a few of the paradoxes I have been observing during this winter. And let me say that to me it holds a deep symbolic meaning when an interaction such as me and Yahya's can work out in spite of us. First of all, not even having a common language. He could just a little English. And then me being female, he's male, I'm old, he's young, he's Asian, I'm European, he's a Muslim, I'm slightly Christian. Most Swedish are so secularized these days, you don't know. He's very tired in the morning, I'm not, and he's very oriented towards his teenage friends, while I and my husband are very oriented towards nature. But it works out. So if we can, everyone can, I think. But those paradoxes that has been evolving for me while helping this young boy out for about now 10 months are the following. Just short examples. On the behalf of the Swedish state, Sweden, the government now claim that Sweden wants to be an international superpower in terms of human rights. But suddenly it locks its borders and puts up one of the most restricted regimes for even letting people come in Sweden, which means that people cannot even seek asylum here, as they should be able to according to the UN Basic Human Rights Convention. That's a paradox. Second example is from my region, Skåne, quite a big part, small in area but big in population. And we have been struggling in Malmö since we have received so many young refugees with helping them and with lots of supportive schemes and programs, many of which have been set up by Ensamkommandes Förbund. That is a civil society organization started up by Omid Mahmoud for and by unaccompanied minors themselves. At first, this small self-help organization was neglected by the authorities, but rapidly it was more and more asked for, and lately they were used even as a flagship for Malmö city because of their civil society refugee work. But when we really should confirm the activity center downtown Malmö, where hundreds of young, especially Afghan unaccompanied minors, came to visit every week, then Malmö refused to put up what the national funding required them to do. So, maybe they can go on, maybe not. Third example, my own municipality, Tomelilla, 13,000 people, surrounded by quite a lot of what should you say, xenophobic people. We managed anyway in December 2015 to rapidly put up schools and living facilities for roughly 100 new coming, mostly Hazara boys. But on the other hand, the municipality is reluctant to really integrate them in classes, in spare time activities, or with extra classes, for example, now during the long summer holiday. So I say the firm political and administrative grip for integration is simply not there yet. But I say yet because I'm working hard on it. Fourth example, my own village. And I think this was mentioned in the beginning of this day. Small village and the surrounding neighborhood. In November, when we were quite overwhelmed with refugees from Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, we all stood up, united. And we arranged for having used clothes for these people. We made Christmas parties. We arranged language training cafe, and we had frequent recreative activities. And with a list of, at the beginning, 25 eager people, in June this year, there were only 3 of us left to carry out what we had planned. That's a little paradox. Everyone wanted to be there in the beginning, but didn't have the endurance to be there towards the end because the migration authorities, they closed down the camp now in June. So now our little village is now silent again. Finally, and last example, my own boy, Yahya. He had a really tough time coming here at the beginning. In November, he sat on his bed crying over the fact that he had been stranded far out in a rainy and ugly forest, far away from his family and friends, with 2 retired. He's gay and smiling, and he's excellent in Swedish, Dari English. The only cloud on his sky right now is that he still has not contact with his sick, alone mother left there in Quetta, Pakistan. So what I mean to say as my part of this discussion today is that if we not now, and I mean now, urgently don't see that these young, strong, living, dancing, crying, playing, struggling, dreaming, hoping, studying children as our own children, as the future for Sweden and for Europe, they are also our hope and our resource. If we don't do that, we will have an old, retarded, retired, ugly, silent, forgotten country, Sweden, and also Europe. We are aging in this part of the world. We need these young people. Or maybe we also find ourselves locked behind the bars that we have put up ourselves. It's told that when many people go in one direction, the ideas and ideals go the other way back. So if Sweden really wants to be a superpower in human rights, we have to make sure that the basic ideas of, for example, and only this way, this exchange can make us have a planet with human rights. Thank you. So let's now hear what our eminent panel will have to put forward. And first out, please take your seats, but Mr. Kristian Berg, last name, Harpviken, from PRIO in Norway, eminent Peace Research Institute. Please put forward your contribution. And you may take your seats.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for the invitation to be here today and the chance also to speak, although I probably learned more from listening than I will learn from speaking myself. It's very nice to be here and to see all this engagement, all this knowledge. Myself, I've been working on Afghanistan now for 26, 27 years, from the late 1980s. I was working in Eide in Afghanistan in the early 1990s, and I've since followed it as a researcher. And over the recent few years, I've been working on a number of different aspects of the Afghan situation. My last book really is on Afghanistan and its neighbors, which is not what I'm going to speak about today. A few years back, I did work on migration, and in the current situation, it's hard not to be interested in the migration situation. So I've been brushing some dust off that old research topic of mine. And since I speak as a researcher, I will probably also leave you with more questions than answers, but I hope we can return to some of these questions in the debate.
One moment.
Yeah.
Let's hear if we need to translate like we did before, shortly what has been said. Dr. Wright, should we have short translations? No time for that. Okay.
Can some people volunteer and whisper in people's ears? Yeah. That could be great.
So please continue.
Okay. Thank you. Afghan migration has been a big topic of study for many, many years. And I think that's worth thinking about today. I'm not going to take you through this slide, but what this slide effectively points out is that the focus of studies of Afghan migration has really gone in periods where in the 1970s into the early 80s was primarily an interest in the causes of flight. Then with the 80s, one turned to exile and integration. Then towards repatriation in the 1990s and reintegration in the 2000s. And what's interesting about this sequence is that this is very much the same sequence that international studies of war-related migration, refugee migration and displacement has been going through simultaneously. Currently, the work is more on transnational ties, and that is a very interesting approach, but it's also one that is not as close to politics and policy as the other approaches of the earlier decades. It's a little disheartening, given that so much work has been going into the study of Afghan migration, to see this site. This is picked from an article posted on the Afghanistan Panelists network, and it's a quote from the head of the Office of the International Organization of Migration in Afghanistan, Richard Danziger, who, in the context of the so-called migration crisis, which I'll return to a little later, was giving an interview to Thomas Ruttig of the Afghanistan Analyst Network, where he basically confessed that despite the fact that one observed a large influx of Afghan refugees in Europe, one knew next to nothing about its causes, its patterns on the Afghan side of things. One knew very, very little, and one certainly had not been able, on the basis of one's presence, one's monitoring, one's contact with various government officials, communities and individuals in Afghanistan, to see it coming. I'm not going to read the site. You can read it yourself if you want to. 2015, the so-called migration crisis. Sorry, I'll take this down a little bit. You see, of course, that from this graph that the number of Afghans coming to Norway in 2015 was rather a dramatic number as compared to earlier years. If we look at 2014, the number was about 40,000. And then in 2015, it was close to 4 times as much.
Norway. Not Norway.
Norway is too small to be visible in this graph. But Sweden is there, actually, as is Hungary and Germany, and I think you also see that the increase for these 3 countries in particular is in terms of the increase from the year previous, pretty much in sync with the overall increase of Afghan migration to Europe. This is a larger, here there are a number of figures, and the blue one on top is really the recipient countries, not only for Afghan migration, but for migration to Europe in 2015. And you will see that Germany and Sweden are the 2 countries that receive the most, if you look at the blue bars there. More interestingly, though, we have the reddish bars at the bottom, so let's have a closer look at those. And here we see what were the main sending countries of refugees to Europe, or to be more correct, asylum seekers to Europe in 2015. And you will see that amongst the named countries, Afghanistan is a good third. So a very significant contributor. What have been the European responses? And here we give you only some key words. And I've already said more than once the so-called migration crisis, because in my view the migration crisis is first and foremost a crisis of European ability to respond, European ability to coordinate. The European Union has in many ways failed the test. Many of us that thought that the European Union should be challenged by the financial crisis that started a couple of years earlier. The most difficult thing that has faced the European Union in its recent history has actually been the migration crisis. So that's where the crisis lies, at the heart of the European Union, rather than at the heart of the increasing flows of migration. Not to belittle the fact that increasing flows of migration, of course, does pose a real challenge. Second key word, border controls. Certainly key on the European agenda. We see new border controls, and I noticed that yesterday a leading Swedish politician was virtually lashing out at Hungary for its tight border controls. And I'm sure that is honestly meant. But at the same time, I don't think there is a single politician in Northern Europe who isn't currently quite happy with the fact that Southern Europe is putting up effective border controls, because that is the only way that the streams to northern part of Europe have fallen as dramatically as they have. So it's possible to have two thoughts in one's head at the same time, and I think for anybody who is responsible for migration policy in Northern Europe now, Southern European border controls is despicable, but they're also very helpful. Asylum residents, we see asylum rights being under threat. We see the bar for what it takes to be given asylum being raised considerably. 3 days ago, Denmark decided to end its practice that it's had for over 30 years now of receiving a good portion of so-called quota refugees through UNHCR. About 500 that they had planned to receive this year, so it may not sound that dramatic. But in fact, that means that there is not any possible way for a person who needs protection to get to Denmark and ask for it, other than illegal routes. No way whatsoever. This was the only possible way, and it's now closed. Return programs. Return programs have been on the agenda for quite a few years. I think they took off around about 2007, 2006, 2007. Norway and Sweden were at the lead along with the UK. But now we see them increasing quite dramatically, and Norway, for example, is now planning a reception center for young Afghan deportees in Kabul, by which it wants to offer a type of protection that will make it easier to argue that they can be securely returned. Information campaigns. Many of us, if we go a couple of years back, would never have believed that we could see the type of information campaigns that we see now. This is an example from the German information campaign, but I'm afraid we could find similar examples from many other European countries. And these campaigns have, in square terms, pretty much as their purpose to scare Afghans from thinking that going to Europe is a good idea. How effective it is, we can discuss at length. I'm not convinced. But in the event that those campaigns actually convey something that is genuinely truthful about how difficult it is to get asylum in Europe, I'm afraid they may not be entirely ineffective, although many of us like to think so. Norway has certainly been very engaged in such information campaigns, launched in November last year and run rather intensely, and going in many ways in sync with the information campaigns of the Afghan government itself. Of course, the Afghan government is also cognizant of the fact that its relationship to international partners matters, that it needs support, and is therefore communicating quite eagerly along the same lines. Which brings me to the last point, which is development aid. And to me, it seems that Western development aid now is not necessarily as much about contributing effectively to the development of Afghanistan as it is about having an instrument by which to convince the Afghans that they need to pursue an effective policy of stemming out migration. So when we see here Minister Balchi from the Ministry of Refugees and Repatriation speaking to the Australian ambassador, I think we can take it for granted that both development aid and refugee streams are on that agenda in one mix or another. But then Afghan migration is not all about Europe, of course, and if we look at this map, which is basically graphically illustrating the extent of displacement related to Afghanistan overall, with the circles on the Afghan map being circles that depict displacement within Afghanistan. The light blue is displacement previous to 2015, the dark blue is from 2015, and we will see that the change in the northeast, Kunduz Badakhshan area has been, Takhar has been particularly dramatic, with a very large new refugee our displaced population in 2015. We also see in the lower right-hand corner the refugees in Pakistan, and those are certainly estimates, but the estimates is that there are about 1.5 million registered and another 1.4 million non-registered. And then Iran, the figures are a little lower, but also quite significant. Again, those are certainly estimates. Nobody has the exact figures here. I was recently in Pakistan, and I have to admit it had escaped my attention, the drama that is playing out in Pakistan as we speak for Afghan refugees. I had picked up a couple of the headlines, but how fundamental a change it was for Afghan refugees in Pakistan had not really dawned upon me until I was there and followed the news and talked to people. It's virtually a wall-to-wall campaign in which you have, which was actually started out with the Prime Minister saying that all Afghan refugees should have left by the end of 2016. And of course, if you have 3 million Afghans in Pakistan, a good share of which may have been born and grown up in Pakistan, and a good share of those, again, perhaps not having much of a network in Afghanistan whatsoever, being threatened by eviction, that is quite serious. So you have very strong political statements from a number of political leaders. Increasingly, though, we do start to see counter-reactions by some political leaders. There is now a little bit more of a debate than there was in the first months. The so-called proof or registration cards that Afghans in Pakistan have held, at least those registered, are not renewed. And people often experience that if they are stopped at checkpoints or otherwise being subject to police scrutiny, they could even be destroyed in front of their eyes. So there is quite a bit of police harassment, I think we can call it that. It's unclear to what extent that is following explicit orders and to what extent it is just the police's interpretation of what its mandate is in this situation. People are losing their businesses. Many are forced to sell. Some would say that in some areas, and I heard stories, for example, from the clothes bazaar in Nowshera, where Afghan tradesmen are very prominent, of people that felt that they had been effectively forced to sell their whole stock at despicable prices. Sort of a business grab, if you want. I'm not sure how common it is, but there certainly were more examples than one. Landlords being worried about extending contracts to Afghan lessees, so many being simply thrown out of the houses that they have lived in for a long time. And finally, access to school and health service is also becoming very difficult, and many are losing their seats in schools, and many are denied access to health services, even if seriously ill. So it's a rather dramatic picture that is emerging in Pakistan. And I'm a little surprised, if you make a connection, that this hasn't come up more in the European debate, because I don't take it for granted that 3 million Afghans in Pakistan will all go back to Afghanistan and stay there. That's a bit of an understatement. I actually take it for granted that a considerable share of those, if they are forced out of Pakistan, will have to look elsewhere, because that's the only way. This is my final slide, and it simply depicts a trend. And I think what is most interesting here is the graph to the left, where the blue below the line is the total number of registered refugees in Pakistan, and the red above the line is returnees from Pakistan in any given year. And you will not be surprised to see that immediately after 1992, actually in 1993, there was a real peak in repatriation, and then it fell very quickly. And again in 2002, after the winter following the fall of the Taliban, there was a real peak, and there you had a little more of a steady stream in the first few years after, but then it fell dramatically around 2006-07, when the security situation deteriorated significantly. But you also see towards the right side that there has been a very strong increase in this last year. Here you see that same figure in a little higher resolution. So I said I'd leave you with some questions. Where are we going? What next? Well, I think we can take it for granted that the migration pressure from Afghanistan and the region will stay high. I think we can also take it for granted that Europe will tighten its controls. We can like it or we can dislike it, but I don't think we should doubt that it's a fact. I think there are significant questions to be asked about the role of the frontline states, and I mentioned Pakistan as a host state. And I think we are already now starting to see that as European states discover what Pakistan is doing to the refugees it hosts, you will also have extensive pressure exerted on Pakistan not to push Afghans out. Not so dissimilar from what we see with a transit state like Turkey, which of course is a transit state for Afghans, but a frontline state for Syrians. And we will see intensifying conflicts over migration. We will see it at the domestic level in Europe. And somebody pointed to the differences between European states with divisions within Europe. I think the divisions actually cut through most European states, and we're seeing a very dramatic polarization in politics with migration issues at the core. Not the only issue, but perhaps the most important issue in the divisions that we see getting deeper, I would say, in virtually every single state throughout all of Western Europe. In Europe, we also see those divisions. I've already talked about that. And then finally, globally, is the type of injustice that the refugee situation so dramatically brings to the fore sustainable in the long run? I'm not sure. There is an inequality here that seems hard for the world to live with. At the same time, it's also hard for those who have the least to effectively mobilize. So therefore, again, I leave that with a question mark. And finally, I think pressure will mount to revisit the international refugee regime. It is a dangerous gamble in the present political climate. And although there may be many reasons to revisit the refugee regime, I think the best we can hope for at the moment is that the refugee regime as it is maintained, and that a revision will come about in a political climate that's a little bit more friendly than the one that we have at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And even though it's quite a dark picture that you point out, we cannot deny that it's well underbuilt by statistical facts. So let's keep your question marks for the discussion. Please, Mr. Hans Linde. We are now following the order that's on the program. So the male comes first. Can we accept that? We have to.
But the female is the boss.
But the last word will be female, isn't it? Mr. Linde is actually our only true politician present in this room. Though you're not in government, you're in parliament, but you're an experienced parliamentarian and you are in the Standing Committee for Foreign Affairs. So you have been to Afghanistan and you have lots of experience to share with us. Please.
Thank you so much. And let me start by thanking FAROE for inviting me to speak here today. It's a great honor. As Lotta said, my name is Hans Linde. I'm a member of the Swedish Parliament since 10 years. And during these 10 years, I've been a member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs. And I realize now that I'm a bit in a peculiar situation here, since what I can see, I'm the only member of the Swedish Parliament here, but I belong to one of the parties in opposition, and I have voted during the last year against the new laws on migration, and I've over and over again criticized our governments for their new positions on migration and asylum. So I understand that I won't speak on behalf of the government, and it will be quite difficult for me afterwards to answer questions about the positions of our government. I will probably share your concerns and your questions as well. I would like to start by saying that, as I said, I've been a member of the Swedish Parliament now for 10 years, but the last year has without any doubt been the most turbulent and dramatic year. We have seen in the light of the refugee crisis, the so-called refugee crisis, how both the political debate, our policies in Sweden and the laws has changed very dramatically in a way that nobody really could expect. And the consequences have been devastating for the men and women leaving the wars in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan and other countries torn by war and conflicts. I must say that we have talked today about the development of Europe, and we're painting the development in quite gloomy colors. But to be honest, we can't really say today that Sweden or Europe is going in one direction. We see different trends at the same time, and I think that's important. We see, as Kristian also pointed out, that Europe and Sweden is becoming more and more polarized. I would say that during the past year, we can say that and see that both Europe and Sweden has shown both its best and its worst sides. On one hand, and I would like to emphasize this, we have seen thousands of Swedes, perhaps tens of thousands of Swedes, trying their best to welcome refugees, to welcome them to our country, to show them compassion and solidarity. We see retired teachers in thousands all over Sweden starting language cafes where refugees can learn Swedish. We see Swedish families, like Lotta's family, open their home for refugees. And we see that every day how thousands of Swedes go as volunteers to the asylum centers. I see in this audience some of these Swedes that I know very well that have volunteered during the past year. Let me tell you about one of these asylum centers that we have in Sweden where many have volunteered. It's in a tiny village called Holmeja. You haven't heard about it. Not even, Swedes have heard of Holmeja. It's a very small village close to the farm in south of Sweden where I grew up as a boy. In Holmeja, 25% of the population voted for the extreme right, the xenophobic party, the Swedish Democrats, in the last election. But when there were an asylum center opened in this village a year ago, there were no protests. Nobody criticized this decision. Instead, people were queuing outside asylum centers to become volunteers. Today, I heard yesterday, because I went home to my parents in south of Sweden, they told me there are still every week 70 persons coming from this small village of Holmeja to volunteer, to welcome the refugees, to show them our solidarity. I want to underline this just to show that this is also Sweden, this is also Europe, and this is also something we see in our continent. But on the other hand, we see a totally different Europe and a totally different Sweden emerge at the same time. A Europe and a Sweden of fear, of hatred, of racism, of Islamophobia. We have seen a growing number of attacks on mosques, on asylum centers. We have seen a dramatic increase when it comes to hate crimes. We have seen the extreme right winning ground in country after country. So that leaves the governments and the politicians of Europe with a very clear choice. Do they want to spread hope? Do they want to stand up for human rights? Do they want to strengthen this popular movement of solidarity and compassion? Or do they want to give in to fear? Do they want to paint the reality in only black colors and portray the refugees coming only as threats and problems for our societies? To be honest, with very few exceptions, and there are exceptions, I would point out like the government in Canada or the government in Portugal, the politicians and governments have chosen the later path. If we go back a year and look what has happened in Sweden and in Europe, we could see here in Sweden that the reactions were so strong when the photo of the drowned Syrian boy, Alan Kurdi, made headlines all over our continent. Tens of thousands of people took the streets to stand up for the right to asylum. The opinion polls show that the vast majority of the people of Sweden wanted our country to be open and welcoming. Our current Prime Minister, Mr. Stefan Löfven, he stood in front of a banner saying, "Refugees welcome," and he said, "In my Europe, we don't build walls." That was a year ago. Well, I'm not really sure if you want to applaud that, because that feels like ages ago, because so much has happened since then. Already in October, a month after we saw the photo of Alan Kurdi, we started to hear a totally different message from our government, from more and more politicians. Our representatives of the government start to talk about a collapse of the Swedish system and the Swedish society. They talked about that Sweden, as one of the richest countries in the world, has reached its limits. The rhetoric was followed by new policies, by new legislations, For the first time since the 50s, we introduced border controls and passport controls at the border between Sweden and Denmark. And the government limited the right to asylum to what they called the minimum level of Europe. And it has not been difficult to find politicians or public voices who have wanted us to go even further. Views and opinions that a year ago would be considered to be extreme are today mainstream. Nobody really reacts any longer when politicians in Sweden or in the rest of Europe calls for closed border or camps for refugees at our borders. So let us ask ourselves, has Sweden collapsed? Have our resources reached their limits? Are the refugees that are coming to Sweden an enormous burden for our country? Last year, Sweden received 163,000 refugees. Considering our population in Sweden, no other country in the European Union received more refugees than Sweden. But then look at our economy, look at our country, and look at the situation we are in now. At the same time, our economy is one of the strongest in Europe. We will have economic growth at close to 4% this year. Our unemployment is decreasing. We spend more and more money and resources on our welfare system. Here in Gothenburg, my hometown, by the way, we are building more houses than we've been doing in my lifetime. Crime level is actually going down. This is happening right now. Of course there are challenges. Of course there are problems and obstacles. It's going to take time, it's going to take resources, it's going to take political will to include all these refugees into our societies. And I would point out as one of the big challenges is that we have seen a very unequal distribution of refugees, both within Sweden and within Europe. While we have accepted 163,000 refugees to Sweden, we see other countries, neighbors, that have received a couple of hundreds, a couple of thousands of refugees last year. And while this city, Gothenburg, received over 5,000 refugees last year, you can just go to our neighboring municipalities and villages and cities, and you will find municipalities where they receive 10, or 15, or 20 refugees. You will find places in Sweden where you hardly can find any refugees at all. And this, of course, makes it so much more difficult to include refugees that have come to our countries in our societies. But let's also be very clear and honest. There is no sign of collapse. There's no sign of crisis in this country. We are wealthier and we are safer than we were a year ago. And that's something I think is important to point out. The government in Sweden and most European countries that have gone in the same direction, they have said that they didn't really have an alternative. But of course, politicians always have an alternative. There's always a choice to be made. We have called this a refugee crisis, but I agree with Kristian, it's a so-called refugee crisis. It's been a crisis for the refugees, but for Europe, for Sweden and for our society, I would say rather it's been a crisis of leadership, a crisis of political will. During the past year, the political debate in Sweden when it comes to migration and refugees has gone from discussing how refugees can be welcomed and included in our society to how the so-called flow of refugees can be stopped and how we can increase the deportation of refugees. But I'm quite surprised that we hardly have seen any debate at all in Sweden or in Europe, by the way, how we can address the root causes of the refugee crisis. How can we stop the wars? How can we stop the violence? How can we stop the persecution that are forcing people to leave their homes? Because we know that border controls, changes in legislation and agreements with Turkey or with the government in Kabul, by the way, won't stop the refugees from fleeing. The only way to stop refugees from coming and leaving their homes are peace and security. It's not rocket science. So I think that the only way forward now for Sweden and the European Union is to start addressing the root causes of the refugee crisis. And in that we also need to see that our policies and our decisions that we have been taking in Europe also has contributed to the situation we have today in, for example, Afghanistan. We also, as a European country, have a responsibility for the refugee crisis and the insecurity of Afghanistan. Because we must see that Sweden has over the past 14 years sent more than 9,000 men and women to participate in the ISAF mission at a cost of more than 1 billion euros. We have said over the years that we are going to Afghanistan to establish peace. But after 14 years, the violence is escalating and the peace feels more and more distant. We must realize and accept that we have made mistakes and we have failed in Afghanistan when it comes to establishing peace. We can see that the global community has failed when it comes to deliver on its promises given to the Afghan people when it comes to development cooperation. And the Afghan people is today paying a high price for these broken promises in the form of unemployment, limited access to education and healthcare, poverty and insecurity. We must also see, and we'll be very clear about this, that we have failed to address the situation for the Afghan refugees in Pakistan and Iran. It's been possible for the governments in Tehran and Islamabad to use the Afghan refugees merely as a plaything in their geopolitical games without any reactions from the West. That has been one of the causes of this situation. So I would just end by saying a couple of more words, because our discussions here today tends to be quite pessimistic. We paint the reality with quite black colors. But I must admit that I also see hope. I see hope in Sweden as well. And I feel hope that we will see a change in our policy, also by our government. Because I see right now that it's not only at Lotta's home that there are being bonds and ties being built. I see that all over Sweden. I see it in the asylum centers. I see it in the soccer fields of Sweden. I see it actually in this museum with the great exhibition Afghan Tales. I hope you have the opportunity to visit. All of these are examples how we're now building ties between Swedes and Afghans, how we are building a solidarity between our peoples that I believe in the long run will be so much stronger than the fear that we see in other parts of our society. And with that I will end. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hans, leaving us with some more hope. Still challenges to meet. So next one in line, Elisabeth Eide, who is teaching academically for journalism in Norway and who is also very familiar with Afghanistan and has been very deeply involved in the Norwegian civil aid to Afghanistan. Please, Elisabeth.
Thanks a lot. Salam alaikum. I have been suffering from what we call SARS, the Severe Afghanistan Return Syndrome, which is something we expatriates, many of us, suffer from in the sense that we won't stop going back to Afghanistan. And I'm one of them. I was there latest in May in Mazar-e-Sharif. And I've been working... yes, it's okay. No, I can deal with the pages myself. Oh, they don't also have to go this way. 2 fingers. What? I don't like Macs, but now I have a proof why I don't like them. Fine. Okay. The last, let me think, 13 years I've been working in a Norwegian pen, Anjuman Kalam Narvi, and we have a very close relationship with Anjuman Kalam Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan they have a Khana Nawashtandan, a writer's house, where people gather at least in the months when it's not snow-clad to read poetry and to be together in the name of literature. So this is one of the things that I've been enjoying doing for the past years. And it's of course not a very safe place anymore, but they still go on, and I admire them for that. This is first a quote from a Norwegian journalist who says it's a long time since Europe's refugee policy was about refugee safety. It is, as is well known, more about us than them. I think it's a pretty good quote, and since I teach journalism, I like to also quote them. And the pictures, by the way, are taken by either me or my husband, who have written a book on Afghanistan, which is on display outside the door there. So the Afghan situation you've heard already. I think there is a doubt about the figure of IDPs. As you can see here, Amnesty puts it at 1.2 million. That might be too small. And Afghanistan is second last on the Social Progress Index and fourth on the least peaceful countries ranking, which is not a very nice thing to be, but this characterizes the nation to which now the European nations want to return more and more thousands of refugees. So my own experiences is field work and visits in Afghanistan, both during Taliban time and thereafter, last time some months ago. And the changes that we see is, for example, Badakhshan, when we traveled there in 2012, it was quite safe. It is no longer. The road access to Mazar, it was okay to travel, the Salang tunnel and the road northwards. The friends we met in Mazar this time had to take an airplane because the road was blocked by Taliban. Bamiyan used to be almost, everything is relevant, more of a sort of more of a tourist paradise. Well, now it's difficult there too. And in Kabul, we know, I was there during one of the first suicide attacks in 2005 when there was a white alert. And we know now how many suicide attacks there are. And for journalists and media workers, this has been the worst year ever, starting with the attack on Tolo TV, which you all have heard about, I'm sure. So what about the Norwegian receiving end? It's small compared to Sweden. We had 31,000 new arrivals of refugees in last year, and among them almost 7,000 Afghans, which is a rather large proportion. And in the first 5 months of this year, a very small number compared. And that has to do with policy, of course. So is that due to a shift in Afghanistan, or is it a shift in Norway? This is a very polemical question. You all know that the shift has been in Norway. In 2015, approximately 20% of the Afghans had their applications rejected, which means that a large majority could stay, while this year it's almost the opposite. So most people are rejected now. That is a very big change and drastic change for the ones who are rejected, of course. And from the Ministry of Migration, we hear that far fewer than before need protection. And has that to do with changes in Afghanistan? We know not. There is less guarantees also for the minors and less economic support for all. They're cutting down on this in spite of Norway being one of the richest nations on the planet. So here's a quote from our Minister of Migration. It's from 3rd July this year, which illustrates the policy that I speak about. Today, no provinces in Afghanistan are so unsafe that nobody can be returned to them. Therefore, many will have their applications rejected. As if this is a new development, now it is more safe than before. This is actually what she, in a bit funny way, says. And of course, she also says that nobody recognized as a refugee will be returned to Afghanistan. But she also uses the language of baseless refugees, and baseless is becoming more of a key word for this kind of politicians. It's perfect timing. This was in the middle of the summer. Many of the practicing journalists were on holiday, and most politicians were on holiday, so there was very little reaction to this statement, actually. Much less than it should have been. So who considers Afghanistan safe? Here are just some quotes you can read for yourself of how people deem Afghanistan to be. The US Embassy, they say it's very, very risky. The Wiki Travel says the same. It's very, very risky. And you may know that US citizens in Kabul, they travel from one part of the town to another by helicopter these days. And this is the town to which one sends people back to a safe place. The Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, likewise, says that it's very challenging situation now. The risk of being hit by terror attacks is substantial in most places of Afghanistan. But still, it's considered safer than before. So there's a paradox. We talked a lot about paradoxes here, but now this is an additional Norwegian paradox. And they also speak about the crime rate having been increased parallel to the negative development of the security situation. And I am tempted to mention that the assassination on the street of Kabul of Farkhunda Malikzada, I'm sure you're all familiar with that one, can be a symptom of a society deteriorating, where morals and crime level is just on a level now unprecedented. I've seen pictures and videos of young men in Western clothes standing there filming the whole event, not taking action against this brutal assassination. And I don't blame everybody in Afghanistan for this, but I think it's a symptom of a society which is rather sick. And for many good reasons after 35 years of war. The shift happened, I'd say, around autumn 2015 in Norway. We had refugees welcome, as in Sweden. We had open arms, we had many people volunteering. But then in the media, which is my specialty, we saw a shift in the streams and waves of refugees, and we talked about the cultural problems that would occur. There was also a shift of words from refugee to migrant, and the baseless turned out to be a very popular word, as also was the focus on cynicism. But who is cynicist? Is it the parents who send their young boys out because they don't see any future for them? Are they cynical, or are they just trying to help? Is it the smugglers? Yes, they are cynical, but isn't it also the politicians? We can at least ask that question. So the situation now, I'm moving towards the end, I'll not use as much time, I hope, is that families with children are increasingly deported, much more than before. And court cases, appeal cases that were won before, where some of us here have been expert witnesses, are increasingly lost. We see also children put in temporary prison camps. We have a deportation camp just conveniently near our largest airport. And they're not supposed to stay there for more than 2 or 3 days, but sometimes they stay there for weeks, families with children. We also see that minors are still accepted but deported at the age of 18. We're missing. They've either gone under earth, they've gone to another country, or we don't know. Or maybe there are always some good people. That could also be best case scenario. And then the European media context. I think I should mention this because there has been media content that has not helped the public opinion. Well, for example, one of this, where they mention young men with background from Middle East and Afghanistan. There is another thing that I should mention, and that is the coalition paradox. That is the Prime Minister saying that Afghanistan is unsafe, but the Migration Minister, being from another more conservative party, saying that it's safe. So we have all this that we could speak at length about. But the recent historical context we need to address, because the historical legacy is such. We, a big we, invested in the war on terror to help Afghanistan, as it were. And of course then you can say the politicians are in need of a degree of success and legitimation for all the billions spent on this war effort. There is a need to say we did something good, although the situation witnesses in a different manner. The worsening situation in Afghanistan challenges this logic, of course. And the refugee situation is then, on the other hand, represented as unmanageable and the individual as unruly masses. So this speaks to a politics of fear that we are facing and that is not too much opposed in the press or among political people. So now, and this is probably my second last slide, there was little stir after the Migration Minister declared that Afghanistan was not so unsafe. One could return people to all the provinces. There was too little political stir. One opposition party in the parliament spoke against, the others kept silent. So there is the political rhetoric speaking against the actual facts on the ground.
Second, I think there is a need for a broadened study and for highlighting the existing research we already have. And there is quite a lot of research telling how is the situation on the ground in Afghanistan. I came across an internal document in the migration authorities, UDI, saying that in Afghanistan there is no ethnic discrimination. Can you believe it? No ethnic discrimination? We know better, and we know from 1880 under Rahman Khan and onwards, we know that. Afghans who come to Norway, and I know many of them, they want to be personal, as was also Lotta. That is an academic joint venture. Asina Shilzad, whom you see here, she is now part of my institution's academic dugnad, as we call it. This is kind of a joint venture we do, and we allow people with education from their homeland to practice in our departments and institutes. Hasina has a 4-year bachelor in journalism studies. She was blown up in a car and was heavily damaged and came here, and probably she will be allowed, or she is allowed to stay. And he is here together with me and with the rector of our institution. This is part of what we do, and I think there are many other ways in which we can include refugees. So if the return policy goes on, at least we could ask for the authorities to provide the young Afghans with some skills so they can better serve their country if they are forced back. I think that is the very minimum. Thank you very much.
Thank you for ending up with something very concrete. I will write good things.
It's a very beautiful place. I know you recognize it.
Yeah. And please do as I did now. Write down the conclusions that we really can put forward after this conference. Skills, educating in vocational training will certainly be one of the useful things that we can put forward into the future. Thank you, Elisabeth. At last, we will have a migrational lawyer, that is Ida Lundberg. She's representing the Amnesty International Swedish section, one should say, isn't that right?
Yes.
And you will give us some enlightenment regarding legislation and what is juridically agreed upon in the world, and maybe some comments on that, I believe.
Yes.
Please go ahead, Ida. You're welcome.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, so I'm Ida Berg from Amnesty International. I'm no expert in Afghanistan, just to make that sure. I'm focused on migration law, international human rights law, so that's my field. And I work with 2 other colleagues in Stockholm on migration law and policy in Sweden, in Europe, and globally. Yes. What I wanted to speak about is the human rights perspective of this. Not so much about driving factors and the situation in Afghanistan, because that's what you're experts on and what we want to cover, but more on the regulatory perspective, the human rights framework, and the situation we have now compared to what can be expected and what's actually agreed upon for the human rights framework. So what we just discussed during this morning is the deteriorating security situation in Afghanistan, something that is known globally, but still, as we've talked about now, the assessment of the situation in Afghanistan is increasingly turning the other way, saying that it's safe to return people to Afghanistan, that there are no general reasons to let people stay in Sweden or elsewhere because of reasons of refugee status, but that there have to be more individual reasons besides just the general security situation or belonging to a certain group of the SR community. So that's the situation that we're having right now. And talking about the refugee crisis, it's the majority part of this refugee crisis for Afghanistan's sake is the IDP crisis of internally displaced people. That's where we see the major shifts and the major growth of people who actually have to flee their homes. I have a figure here somewhere that we had about 180,000 Afghans reached in Europe last year, but we had more than that having to leave their homes in Afghanistan during the first 4 months of 2016. They're still somewhere in Afghanistan, most of them, but just to compare the numbers here, who are actually the most vulnerable ones in Afghanistan right now. So it's just a small part that actually managed to make it come to Europe. A large number of people having to move from their homes, to escape their homes in Afghanistan, and a very large number of people having to try to get to neighboring countries such as Pakistan and Iran, who cannot get from there to another country and who can neither return back and who are forced to stay there during conditions that are really making them very vulnerable to different kinds of abuse. So that's the situation we're seeing. And talking about the IDP situation and the situation of refugees in neighboring countries, that one of the biggest problems there from a human rights perspective is the lack of a legal status, that people can stay there, they manage to get into the country, mostly illegally or irregularly, but they get no permission to stay, they cannot get any permission to work, to buy somewhere to live, to get proper education, healthcare and so on. So we have a situation with massive vulnerability for these people. They cannot find a sustainable future for themselves and their children. And we also have the situation that you talked about with pressure from Pakistan, amongst others, to return Afghanis to Afghanistan. And it's not just actually deporting people as they do from Iran, but also putting pressure on Afghan refugees to make it more or less unbearable to stay in Pakistan and then return them so that they actually return customary law. So it's not something they can say that they have not signed up to. That's something that applies to every state in the whole wide world. No exception can be made for anyone, irrespective of status or nationality of the person. So that's a very important thing to remember, the situation in these neighboring countries and their responsibility for people who live there and for their possibilities to either stay there if they want to make their future there, or if they want to get to other countries or to return to their country voluntarily. Also talking a bit about the EU situation, we have these different deals and negotiations going on between the EU and other countries of transit and origin for refugees. And this EU-Turkey deal, which we'll touch upon a bit, is a very selective kind of deal. You have a situation where Syrians are favored compared to Afghans, and there's no basis in human rights law or international law to say that one group is more deserving of the right to apply for asylum than another. So every person has the right to apply for asylum. That doesn't mean that you have the right to apply for asylum in the country of your choice. That's not part of it, but the part is that you have the right to apply for asylum, to leave your country or another country that you're in and to apply for asylum. So we have the situation where the focus has been on Syria, which of course is understandable because of the situation in Syria, but also something that is not really justified compared to what human rights law and international law is saying about the right to apply for asylum. And that's a general issue that we have in the EU now, with discussions going on about border controls, about deals with countries of origin and transit to condition aid upon their willingness to cooperate in migration control, which is also very actual right now, with also talks going on with Libya, which is extreme in its nature. You know the conditions in Libya, just having discussions with such a country or any kind of representative of the state that you might be able to talk to in Libya it's very worrying, the developments we're seeing now, with making every kind of effort to circumvent the right to apply for asylum in Europe. And about the general security situation, you said with the situation in Norway, that suddenly Norway is saying that it's safe to send people back to Afghanistan, even though we all know the situation is getting worse in Afghanistan. I could also mention there was a case in the European Court of Human Rights in July 2016 saying that the general situation in Afghanistan is not in itself sufficient to involve a risk of treatment contrary to the general prohibition on torture So that means that just the general situation is not in itself a reason to grant someone protection in a country where they apply for asylum. But of course that doesn't mean that there are individual circumstances and certain individual situations that might make it or that will make it a right for you to get asylum in a country. But that's probably why this shift has come so forcefully, and that many countries in the EU now feel that, well, we have this judgment from the European Court of Human Rights, and they say it's okay, so we follow up on that. But as with all judicial judgments, you have to study the assessment and study what they say, and not just take the actual ending of the judgment for granted and then just follow up on that. So, but that's also something to remember. What I could say more is if we would have any recommendations, any thoughts on how to solve the situation. I'm not really speaking of the security situation or the problems with the conflict in Afghanistan, but talking of it from a migration refugee rights perspective. One of the most important things is, of course, to increase the safe and legal routes for people who have to leave Afghanistan, and also leaving Pakistan and Iran because of situations there where they cannot get a future, basically. And what we're seeing now is, from the Danish perspective, what we talked about, that they're not anymore employing the right to use quota refugees, that they have stopped that cooperation with the UNHCR. That's a sign in the wrong direction, even though we're now getting some signals from the EU which could be positive, that they want to explore possibilities of increasing safe and legal routes to Europe, to contribute to that and to make it in sort of a cooperation between the countries in the EU, making a framework for legal routes to Sweden and to other countries in Europe. But the problem we see with that, of course, is this thing I talked about earlier, with the ways to curtail the right to apply for asylum, and just shifting these two against each other, that you use the rights or you increase the possibilities to get here legally, while you push up border controls and increase deals with countries of origin and transit to make it impossible to get here spontaneously, as you could say. So we have that situation that is partly positive, but also could lead to infringements of international law and human rights law if the right to apply for asylum is traded off by these deals on legal and safe routes to Europe. And also, just as final word, the possibility and the responsibility of the international community as towards international humanitarian funding is also something that we've seen just decreasing. The pledges that the UNHCR are making for the need of support for immediate aid and crisis support in Afghanistan is met by just small portions. It's not even like a tenth of what's needed. And you can just put that in contrast with what we're doing in Europe and the money we're spending on border controls and migration deals, and still we're giving less and less to the countries of origin to help in that process. So we see a real conflict there of different means of trying to control the situation without addressing the problems at the cause. Yes, I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Ida. You kept the time better than any other, but you said more things, I believe, than any other panelist was able to do in such a short time. So I'm sure we must come back to you. I have to pose a question to Dr. Weiss. Is he inside? Yes. Now we have, according to the program, 20 minutes for questions, but the previous panel took quite a long time. Please, can we extend that? Can we start having our discussions for more than 20 minutes only? Will it be all right? Yeah, the concluding marks we can make shorter. So, and a point of order. Previous panel was partly translated Dari Swedish English. Is there a need to give some brief summaries on these extensive contributions? I think those people who are not able to follow in English, they have left the room. Am I right? I think the arranging FAROE has to answer this. Yeah, some kind of English or Dari translation. It's up to you. I think it's fair to maybe, if possible, give some kind of translation, isn't it? Yeah. The PowerPoints might be helpful in the translation. Now we have a major discussion on that point, whether to translate or not. Yes, that's a good idea. While you are discussing that, let's go to some elaborations on issues. And I would like to start asking the panel, I think there was kind of a theme between you all in the sense that we are on one hand having facts, statistics, figures, telling us what is true, what is reality, and on the other hand we have images, pictures in our heads, sometimes conveyed by media, and most of them conveyed by fear. We are afraid of the development. We are afraid of what's going to happen or not happen. And these images compared to facts, how shall we deal with them in order to go forward? What is your spontaneous comment on this discrepancy between facts and images? Who would like to start? Elisabeth.
I think we have to ask, where does the fear come from? I mean, who produces the fear? Does it come from the refugees? Or is it the political signal or the political symbols from above that creates fear mostly? It's a long, I think, recognition that if politicians signal that a group of people are unwanted, that creates more fear in the population itself. I would not excuse the media either, because if the media only report on the problematic sides of being a host country to refugees, then of course there will be the inner fear that you talk about, Lotta, inside your head. If you sit down on the bus and you see, let's say, 4 or 5 young boys with sort of refugee background, and you think, oh, maybe they will pickpocket me or anything like that, because that's the only thing you read in the media. You don't read the story about Lotta having 3 Afghan young men in her house. You don't read very much about me and Hasina either, although I become her khalajan, as they say in Afghanistan. So I mean, the positive stories that might help the understanding and the hospitality, which we who have been in Afghanistan have enjoyed so much. I mean, it's almost shameful to think of the way in which Afghans are received when you know how we have been received in Afghan homes over the years. I feel bad about that.
Hans, how do you convey your positive, hopeful message during or through your channels?
I must say this has been one of the biggest challenges during the past year, that we can see that myths that a year ago it was spread, in the most obscure web pages of the internet are now moved into the mainstream of the political debate. And it's so difficult when you're confronted with myths every day, confronted with propaganda about, and to be honest, also out clear lies about refugees, to confront them over and over again. I think that Elisabeth has a really good point, that we need to also to show the positive examples. Because I feel that, that for me, and I guess most Swedes actually meet Afghan refugees on a daily basis or every week. We have such a positive experience. We meet all these Afghans so eager to be part of this society, to have an education, to contribute. And then you open the newspaper and you see a totally different story. So I also think it's important that, we need more and more areas in our society where ordinary people are meeting each other, where ordinary Swedes meet ordinary Afghans. Because I'm pretty sure that those meetings will crush most of the myths about Afghans coming here.
So having people meeting and interacting on a personal level is one of the remedies. But I'll turn to PRIO, who is really into facts and figures. And one way is also to conveying facts. This is a small pamphlet that I hope everyone in Sweden will be familiar with. You can watch it. Here are good and supportive facts to their benefits and true facts about migrations. But how do you manage to spread out facts and statistics in a way that also hits the heart and the stomach, not only the brain? Or do you?
That's a very good question, and I think if that's what you are intending to do, you will always feel that you're not good enough at it, and there is more that you should do. We communicate with many audiences, of course. We communicated with politicians, we communicate with policymakers, but also with the larger audience. And I think in the political climate we are in now, I don't think what Elisabeth said makes a lot of sense. But what I'd like to add to that is that if we cannot neglect the fact that in some of these sentiments are quite deep amongst common people, and I think they are genuine in the sense that they are more than mere reflections of the manipulation of politicians. Yes, politicians compete for support, compete for voters, and are often smart in trying to devise a particular debate so that they earn from it. Yes, but that's not all there is to it. I think many people are genuinely worried about the developments, and you can be worried about developments even if you think all Afghans are superb people. You can, for example, be worried about developments for some of the reasons that has to do with the type of figures that I had on the board here. 3 million Afghans in Pakistan who are told that they will have to leave Pakistan within the end of the year. Last year, what I call the so-called migration crisis was 1 million people coming to Europe. And that already was more than we were able to tackle. Partly, that's our own fault in Europe, but nonetheless, the figures are quite high. So there are many aspects of this, and of course, European states are by and large welfare states, where we are unable to tackle, unwilling to tackle, or unwilling to live with the people who come here living in the same type of dismal conditions that, everybody in Pakistan would find perfectly acceptable. And we are very worried about our welfare states. So there are I think we have to recognize that there are some genuine issues here that are very deep. And now I mentioned the most difficult ones, but let me just end on mentioning one fact that is more a direct response to your question. One of the things that has become very clear to us, to our research, and I think the research from many others as well, is that what often is pointed to as a paradox, namely that refugees and migrants who have strong connections with their home countries are poor citizens.
Or what?
Is poor citizens. So an Afghan coming to Norway who continues to travel regularly to Afghanistan, spend much of his or her money in Afghanistan, and be engaged in the politics or civil society or whatever of Afghanistan is a poor Norwegian citizen. Now I think increasingly what we see from research is that that's exactly the wrong image. The person who is genuinely engaged in his or her home community is also that is genuinely engaged and a constructive citizen here at this end of the scale.
So the engagement spills over.
Facts, I think it is very important to convey in a convincing manner. And some of them are actually quite simple and quite neat, but counterintuitive and can really make a difference.
And things like that can also be pinpointed out in research, making that kind of things clear, that if you're an engaged person, you're likely to be that both in keeping in touch with your country of origin and also in your present. I'd like to put the question also to Ida. Amnesty is known both as a very strict humanitarian legislative organization, scrutinizing what's happening, for example, in Pakistan or not, but also as an activist organization. How do you, for example, in Sweden, deal with attitude refugees or xenophobia or protecting the welfare state. What is the response from your civil society side of this?
Yes, well, one important part of Amnesty that's different from many other organizations such as Human Rights Watch is that we are a member-run organization, so we have members who are contributing to the most of our finance, and we also have other organizations who help us with our funds. And we also have many of our members are activists in different areas. So it's very important for us, of course, to engage activists in concrete activities, in reaching out to the general population or different groups that we want to reach. So it's not just doing research and coming up with our policy, but also engaging people in taking part in taking stand in what they believe in. And we have different activities in Sweden, for example, with our activists who are specialized in migration law. They organize different sessions and seminars and movie screenings and things to give information, but also help with meetings and help with people to meet each other, to see each other, and to learn about each other, and to get a personal image of a refugee, which is very important. And what we see with the media, as you talked about, is that pictures of refugees have been mostly pictures of a mass of people, just groups, and just flows, streams, faceless individuals, numbers, statistics. And what we really need is the personal meeting and people to see that refugees are people like you and me, like anyone who just want to come somewhere where they are safe and where their children can be safe. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think both Elisabeth and Hans want to add to this topic. Elisabeth.
Yeah, very shortly. After 4 years in Norway, are either employed or under a Norwegian education system. That might convince some, but you have to speak to the heart, and that's when you need storytelling, I believe. I'm currently a leader of a research project where we're interviewing newly arrived refugees from Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq about the way in which they use mobile telephones underway. And the way is long. I mean, it's not that they take the flight. They spend like 20 to 30 days from their country to our country. And there we get stories. They tell immense stories. And I work together with a young Afghan, Hazara, and a young Kurdish Iranian on this project to help me. And this is a wonderful project because it started also with the way in which they told me about their own flights, which were very dramatic, actually. So, I mean, storytelling helps. And one example of this, which is quite interesting, is the Party of Progress in Norway, the rather extreme right-wing party. A member of that party in our northernmost he was very hostile to immigrants, and then one asylum home invited him there for a meal. And then he came to know, oh, these are nice people. And next thing he did was to organize a Christmas rally together with the Afghan asylum seekers and other asylum seekers in that county. He changed. And to put this into research, it's a fact that it's shown by migrancy researchers that if you live in an area where you have daily or weekly contact with refugees or migrants, you are much less hostile than if you live in an isolated place where all you get is ideas in your head. You don't know them. So to get together, as they did with Anti-Racist Center in Oslo, they had something called tea time. And Muslim families invited Norwegians, Christians, non-Christians for tea. And in the end, there were so many people wanting tea, and the families offering tea were almost exhausted. So that was also a good thing.
So spending your time on internet just watching xenophobic sites is not a good starting point for making friends with refugees. Hans, you're content. I could say that in this pamphlet that I'm advertising here, it's stated two things. First, in Sweden, that is, more and more people are actually getting more positive towards refugees and towards welcoming them. But on the other hand, also more and more people are voting on these xenophobic parties. So here we have maybe a contradiction or a split. Some of our population, I think it goes for Europe, are more positive. Those who have these actual personal meetings, and on the other hand, those who are sitting on internet and reinforcing the prejudice that they already have, those are getting more and more negative. So this is a challenge. But let me pick quite another question for the panel that has been touched upon during the day, and that is the agreement of, what was it now, readmission, sending back refugees. These kind of agreements are very much discussed. Could they be formed at all in a good way? Is it quite a lousy suggestion? Should we reject them altogether? Or could they, in some sense, be useful? Is it possible to make them in a way that's helpful both for receiving and for leaving countries? I'd leave anyone to start to pick up on this. Maybe we have a solution or a rejection. No.
Well, nobody wants.
Elisabeth?
I don't want to take all the time, but I think what we've seen, there was a halt in this agreement in 2015 because the Afghan Minister of Refugees said, no, you should not return now because the situation is very complicated in Kabul. This made a sensation in the Norwegian press, actually. But then again, the agreement was reformed, and there is an agreement with Norway now. And then they rely very much on the International Organization of Migration, both with posters in our collective transportations, like buses and trams, of very happy families receiving the refugee coming home, where you could sort of replace them with bombed out areas instead. But, well, we haven't come to that yet. But I think there could be some claims. I mean, because we have seen, I have followed some cases of, and one guy who was an agnostic, I mean, he had stopped believing in Islam, and he was sent back to Afghanistan regardless after losing in all levels of the court. And if he had not been taken care of by an NGO and had been helped there and had nothing to do with IOM, he would have been in really, really bad condition. So, but I don't know if the NGOs cannot be a solution to that because they work with other issues. So I think it's very difficult to support these readmission treaties. On the other hand, we know they exist, so maybe we have to be both principled on one level and pragmatic on another level, saying that as long as they exist, at least they should do this, at least they should do that.
For example,
vocational training, yes, and also training centers locally, providing them with some space of education. We know the concours in Afghanistan for higher education. Many of you know that much better than me. It's very hard to get admission, so how much do we support an enlargement of opportunity?
Hans?
Well, let's be honest, already today, without a readmission agreement between Sweden and Afghanistan, it's possible for Sweden to deport Afghans back to Afghanistan. We're already doing it. But with a readmission agreement, it will be much easier for the Swedish authorities to deport people back to Afghanistan. And so far, the Swedish government has pushed really hard for agreement with the government in Kabul so far, and I'm quite happy so. And the government in Kabul has refused to sign any such agreement, and that's actually I think quite positive, because we must realize that the government in Kabul doesn't really today have the capacity to really give a proper welcome to the refugees that we deport. They have not the capacity to give them shelter, education, security, anything. So I can't really see how we can formulate these kind of agreements today with the situation that we have today in Afghanistan. And I must say, it was quite strange. Ashraf Ghani was here in Sweden in December, and I had the opportunity to meet him with representatives from all the political parties in Sweden. And it was one of the strangest meetings I have ever attended during my time in Parliament, because Ashraf Ghani came to the Swedish Parliament to thank us for the work of the Swedish Committee for Afghanistan, for the Swedish Development Corporation, for our solidarity. And then it was time for the Swedish MPs to ask the questions. And I didn't ask about our development cooperation or the human rights or the security situation. They only asked, when are we going to sign an agreement with our country so we can start increasing the deportation to Kabul?
All parties except yours.
Well, we were some of us that raised actually other questions, but that was quite a bizarre situation. That was the sole focus on most of the MPs attending that meeting. What you have seen now this spring in the European Union, which is extremely worrying, is that the European Union is starting to discuss to use development cooperation and development aid to Afghanistan to blackmail the government in Kabul. More or less the European leadership should say that if you don't accept and sign a readmission agreement, we will start cut in development cooperation. This is so far a discussion going on. I'm very glad that the Swedish government so far opposed such an approach, but I think there's a huge risk that the European Union will start to use development cooperation, and that will be so counterproductive. It will, it will hit the poorest of the poor in Afghanistan so badly.
Blackmailing.
Exactly.
Can I just ask a point of facts from Ida? Is the instrument of such agreements for readmission, is it a common tool, or is it a rare thing in global context?
Well, I cannot really assess how common it is in numbers, but there's always been agreements between states on how to deal with nationals of their countries and how to cooperate on deportations, but also on scholarships and visas and things like that. So there's several different kinds of agreements between different countries on how to deal with travel of nationals between them. But of course, states have the possibility to make such deals with each other, but you always have the obligation of human rights and international law at the bottom that has to be respected. So you cannot really start with the agreement and then hope that human rights will be fulfilled and respected. But of course, a condition for having such a deal is for human rights and international law to be respected.
Yeah.
So that has to be a standing condition for any such talks. That's basically what we can say as a human rights organization.
And a country that can live up to such good conditions, they might not even have refugees to start out with.
Oh, yeah.
I believe you wanted to add something, Kristian.
Yes, couple of issues here, and perhaps I take on the role to some extent of being a devil's advocate, because we all seem to agree on many of the fundamentals, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in this whole debate about refugee admission in the West, one of my main concerns is that there are a lot of people who are deserving of protection who don't get it. Because the only way now of actually getting to apply for asylum in a Western country is to be able to mobilize the resources and be able to go there through illegal channels. There are lots of aspects of that, of strengthening smuggler networks and so forth. And that I virtually take for granted that we would agree is a problem. The second issue, though, which may be more difficult, is the question as to, is it permissible, is it acceptable that Western countries say that amongst those who get here and apply for asylum, we give asylum to some and we send others back? It's only the opposite side of the question that we have already asked, but we haven't really asked it in that manner, and once you ask it in that manner, it's a little bit more brutal. One may even think that ethically the world should be a very different place, and everybody who has himself or herself finds reason to undertake such a travel actually has good enough reasons that they should be warmly received. Politically, I don't think that's a very viable standpoint, though. The world genuinely is unfair. I have no hesitation saying that. But I don't think politically such an approach is viable. And it's worth reminding ourselves that I think in Norway and Sweden and a number of other countries, if we go back a year or two, we would hear a number of people, certainly on the left, but in Sweden, virtually across the political board, with the exception of the ultimate right, saying that we should have an open door policy. Everybody who wants to come to us should come. I can't recall having heard a single politician said that in the last 12 months. And again, it's back to what Hans said about how dramatically things have changed. So being a devil's advocate is probably not what I am, but at least a little bit of a reality check in what the debate is like. And I do think, as a starting point for the debate, to assume that return of some is in itself illegal is not really viable. And I think the reminder about the fact that the selection mechanism now is simply that those who get to seek asylum are those who are able to mobilize the resources and have the health to undertake the travel are the ones who can apply. I don't think that is a good selection mechanism, which ultimately may be a call for a total rethink of the way it works. And I already said I think that is risky at the moment, but it is genuinely an unfair system the way it works, also if everybody was permitted.
It's not only that. You have to consider also that 300 journalists left Afghanistan last year, according to NAI, Open Media in Afghanistan. And they leave Afghanistan often for rather tough reasons, because they've been harassed, they've been threatened, and there are special ways in which one deals with people who are at the core of what remains of democracy in a country. But I basically think it's important that you ask those questions that you did.
Yes, and I feel that this discussion raises more questions than answers. But let's now go to the audience and open up for questions and remarks from the floor, please. And make sure there is a microphone around. Otherwise, you have to come in front, because we want to hear you. Come here. Yeah. We want to hear what you're saying.
I want to see you too.
Yalla. Please come forward and take the microphone. Here's a microphone.
Excuse me. I had a question which I wanted to pose to you about statistics.
It's polite. It's on.
Okay. And it was about the statistics that you showed. I'm wondering. Okay, my name is Reza Javid, and I'm working mostly with statistics, so I'm very interested on when I see statistics. So, I was wondering where you have got the statistics. Is it your stat, OECD or other sources? And the main reason was that maybe behind those digits you can see some people who are registered twice or 3 times, because some people come. We knew that many people came to Germany first. Because Germany opened their borders, and they had intentions to let Syrians come in, but many Afghans also thought that maybe it's for all migrants, so they came to Germany, and then Germany said that, okay, we have no place for Afghans, and many of those Afghans who were in Germany then came to Sweden. So I'm wondering if the statistics show those as two, you can say, doublets or only once.
So you put the question to Kristian.
Yeah, Kristian.
It's a very good question, and I think I'll answer it very short. My starting point is that all of the statistics is unreliable, inaccurate, undoubtedly. Some is more inaccurate than other. In the slides there will be references, so you will see where all the statistics come from. It's not my own statistics, it's picked from different sources. But I will make one more point, and that I think the statistics that I have picked and displayed is real in the sense that this is by and large the statistics that is believed in, and that is the starting point for decisions that are taken politically. So in that sense it is real, however inaccurate it is. Those are pretty much the sort of the mainstream figures, and from some of these things there are a lot of different figures circulating, but I have not used extreme figures in any sense. They're pretty much what is taken for the truth, although, as your question depicts, it is not the truth. It's very inaccurate.
You're happy with the answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Next question, over there.
Hello everyone, my name is Khaled. I have come from Germany, and I'm newly in Germany. I'm newly integrated in Germany since 7 months. I'm living in Germany, and I have seen lots of new refugees who have recently arrived. Some of them have escaped from one country who had not the fingerprint or whatever. They came to Germany. And lots of them are having big problem with their future, because still they didn't hear what will be the future for them. This is the main point that they are concerned. And I'm sure it's with the other countries as well, that lots of refugees have the same problem. Since we are here and we have one of our colleagues from Swedish Parliament, my question is that regarding situation for such people who don't have any idea for their future, and some of them, I speak with them, they have seen really bad things, months in prison, they have lost their family members during the way coming, some of them have saw them drowning in the water, some of them have saw them. It's really, really disturbing stories. If we collect them, it's really disturbing. But the main concern I have, because I came here to convey a message from here to them back, that some people thinking about refugees and they want the situation for refugees to be better. That message I want to hear that from Swedish Parliament, that what will be your opinion regarding future situation for refugees.
So, Hans, are you ready to answer? Maybe not on behalf of the whole Swedish politics, but at least
no,
your
but
party.
I will try. Because this is not an unknown problem. It's an enormous challenge in Germany, but also in Sweden. We see today that too many of the refugees that come to Sweden or to Germany have to wait for a year or more than a year before they get a decision. And during this time, they are stuck in an asylum center, sometimes far out in the countryside. Up to now, it's not been possible for them to learn Swedish or to work. I fully understand that many are frustrated with this situation, and that this frustration also turns into new problems and challenges. We have had a number of reports in Sweden about problems in the asylum centers, violence, etc. I think this is one of the root causes for this, that people are stuck in facilities that they were supposed to spend perhaps weeks, months in, but now spending years in, and sitting waiting with this uncertainty and this frustration. So you are fully right, it's an enormous problem, and I think that if we really want to create a climate where we can include refugees in our society, we really must ensure that you get your decision as soon as possible, that you can start learn Swedish or German as soon as possible, that you can start work or have an education as soon as possible. That's crucial.
I also would like to add up to the answer to that question, and that is because I'm a former parliamentarian. And I think two things regarding traumatized refugees. One thing is that ordinary people, they don't know that. They don't understand how deeply hurt people can be psychologically and in what they have experienced out of maybe being tortured or what they have seen or experienced as refugees. This is unknown to the public. They think that these people behave oddly because they're so from another culture, blah, 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 they're weird people. They don't know that they are so badly hurt. So that's one thing that has really to be told to the public. And second thing that I actually, I think I was the one introducing that in Parliament 2012 in Sweden, because I was at that time working for the Red Cross, who do treatments. One of the actors in Sweden who help refugees who are traumatized. And now in this budget this year, there will be more money for, at least in this country, to help out, to give adequate treatment to these people. Because you cannot expect people to be well integrated, to be well functioning, to learn language, to cooperate friendly in centers and if you're so badly hurt. So real medical and psychological treatment to these people, that's a costly thing, and resources, funds has to be put for that. And it's slowly coming, at least in this country, and that has to be, I think, spread out to North European context to help out the people, the refugees who are here. Now we have a question from our supreme moderator.
Well, I will say the first in Dari, then my question will be in English. پرسان ما ای است چون بسیاری از خانم‌های افغان مجرد آمدن و در اینجا اگر رد بخورن بسیاریشان در خطر هستند، بسیاریشان از فامیل‌های آمدن که برگشتشان سخت است که کدام کمک‌های از طرف وزارت خارجه اینجا، از طرف وزارت بین‌المللی بر از اونا میشه. چون ما در بلژیم بودم در یک کنفرانسی که میخواستن اینی خانم‌ها را کمک کنن در تحصیل و زبان یاد گرفتن که بتانن از او طریق در سویدن یا در مملکت‌های اروپایی بانن. Eller jag kan ju säga det på svenska tillbaka. Nu har jag sagt. Nå, jag är norsk också. Nej, men jag är ifrån Norge. Nej, men jag är ifrån Norge. Så jag är ifrån Norge. Så de kan inte förstå mig. Ja, men mitt spörsmål var att många ensamstående kvinnor, när vi pratar alltid om invandrare så blir vi nästan prata generellt. Men jag tänker den där mest kvinnliga, efter jag själv är väldigt kvinnoaktivist i den här rättningen. Så tänker jag de kvinnor som har kommit ensamstående och blir returnerade tillbaka till ett land som Afghanistan eller ett land som Syrien, Irak eller vad som helst det är. Och vilken problematik de har rönt från. Har regeringen tänkt på vilken hjälp de kan få i return tillbaka? För i vissa länder så har tänkt att ha en kriscenter där för dessa kvinnor, en beskyddande, själv om de blir skickade tillbaka dit. Men har vi någon ordning för i Sverige, och ser det lite runt, jag har fått som arbeta från EU-parlamentet nästan och gå runt till asylmottagare och spöra vilken problematik har dessa människorna som har kommit. Och det vill inte säga att nej men det är dålig mat på asylboende, det är inte den här problematiken, men lite mer att vår taskira, vår passport som inte blir legaliserat här och lite mer att den kvinnosituationen som är just nu, som är römt från, många av dem har römt riktigt från familjen för att de har fått chansen nu för att komma väck från dem. Vad händer med dem? Nu och när de bara sitter. Ja, det är lite en generell fråga. Elisabeth.
I've visited twice the crisis center, one of the crisis centers in Kabul, and to say that it is a beneficial thing to send women back to such a place is a very dubious conclusion, because what the worry is in the center is that these women who have seek refuge there, they do not know where to go from there, because they're stigmatized and there is no way they can just return, because they run away from forced marriages or from rape or from forced prostitution or from bad tradition, all these different tribal traditions. And the problem for this crisis center is you get influx, but it's very hard to get them out into society again. They haven't found any way. But I have one of the people we interviewed in this mobile flight project was a young woman who came with her grandmother, actually. They traveled together, the two of them. It's an odd couple, to say it that way, in refugee situation. But she had been threatened at work for working for an NGO with some Western connections. And I think that is something you see, that when women go to these organizations, they often receive a lot of threats. So I think it seems to me, at least in Norway, women have a somewhat better chance of getting permission to stay, because at least authorities, even if they're strict, they realize these dangers to some extent. I haven't heard of many cases of single women being sent back, but maybe others have. Maybe you have, Kristian.
I know that Karzai, some years back, he closed down a women crisis center in Kabul, saying that this is a brothel. Exactly. So, please, now your turn. Take the microphone.
Hej, Jag heter Marcia. I cannot speak English. Lite svenska. Jag heter Marcia från Iran. Kurdisk och persiska. من 6 سال اینجا هستم، 6 سال به سوئد اومدم و در طول این 6 سال هیچ کس نبود که حرفهای من رو که حقیقت بود باور کنه، چون دروغ نگفته بودم. اینو بهشون بگو.
Ja, hon säger att nu har jag bott här i 6 år, iransk och persisk, halvkurdisk är hon. Hon har bott här i 6 år och de har inte varit någon som har trott på hennes historia, för att hon menar det är bara för att hon har sagt sanningen och inte hittat på någon historia.
در طول این 6 سال من بارها و بارها به هندلگاره هایی که داشتم میگفتم که من کرد هستم، همیشه مورد آزار و ظلم به خاطر مذهب، به خاطر کرد بودنم تحت ظلم و ستم بودم. پسرم ایران کشته شده، ولی چون مدرک نیست توی اینترنت پس ما نمیتونیم باور کنیم.
بله.
Talk English because there is a lot of people from other countries that cannot read.
Okay, sorry.
That I want to add that this question that you asked last time, that is her question. That was her question too. But she didn't receive the answer. The translated answer.
Okay, the answer.
Exactly.
Okay, but we get some answer from Elisabeth, so I will tell you in diary. Just give it 5 minutes. Okay, shall I say that in English? Okay, she's saying that, okay, a lot of people have understand her in Persiska, so maybe I will talk to you in English. She said that she have been here in 6 years. She have don't lie anything. She told the government in 6 years that her child have been murdered in Iran, and she have been tortured for being Kurdi, for being the other religion than the rest of people there. And but no one trusts her, so yeah.
و عملا تو کاری میکنن که انسان حتما باید دروغ بگه تا اقامت رو بگیره، ولی من هرگز نمیتونم و نمیتونم برگردم چون من در خطرم دلیل دارم.
And then she say you have to always have a paper and nothing every time. It was one of a big question in EU Commission 3 days ago, that you have to have a paper in everything you're talking about, and it's very hard and difficult in Afghanistan, in Iran, in Iraq to have a paper about your life or about something that we are registered here everywhere in Sweden, so we can have a paper to show, but not in those countries. She said I don't have those papers, so that's why, and I cannot lie, and I am now living here without any chance to have a permanent.
So what's the question?
الان من میخوام ببینم که آیا میگریشن، من 6 سال اینجام، الان حدود 9 ماه 10 ماهه رفتم پرونده رو بعد از 4 سال ارائه دادم بهشون، بازم هنوز پرونده من معلوم نیست اصلا کجا هست و کی بهش رسیدگی میشه. و در طول این 6 سالم من فشار خون، ناراحتی قلبی، ضربان قلبم، تمام مشکلات رو به خاطر استرس هایی که به من وارد شده اینجا گرفتم. و اگر میتونستم برگردم ایران، اگه میدونستم تو همون فرودگاه منو نمیگیرن، هیچ وقت نمیشستم تو این سن سال این همه مصیبت رو من اینجا بکشم، تهدید پلیس قایم شدن و خیلی مسائل دیگه.
So I have understand his question is that it's taking a long process in migration to make a decisions for refugees, and that long decision make persons sick. That long decision make you to wait for a life you don't deserve. If I could understand that it will take me the 6 years, I would never come to a country that don't accept me.
Thank you for a very good remark. I think we can use that as a starting point for the last question to the panel, and that would be your summing up of this session, because we have now the final conclusion of the whole day to come. But my question to you is the same as I used to pose when I walk around in villages and small schools in Afghanistan or Africa, asking children, if you were president or if you were the prime EU commissioner or if you were king and you had all the power of your country or EU, what would be your first day decision? What would you do the first day in power to change things for the better? And I believe that we let Kristian start and then Hans and then Ida and Elisabeth finally. And you have to keep it short.
I'm tempted to ask for an exemption because that's an impossible question to answer. I'm more tempted to bring up one thing which extends from what we have discussed, which I think is really important, and I think it's important for those of us who are here, and that is to point out one particular type of dilemma that politicians face. At the moment, there is quite wide agreement amongst politicians that limiting immigration to the West is important. One may like or dislike that, but that is widely agreed. One is willing to do a lot to try to stem migration, including to send very strong signals that this is not a good place to be. The problem with the things one does to demonstrate that this is not a good place to be is that also hits those who already are here. That is a very deep dilemma that we see coming up in a lot of the political decisions. I'm not defending it, I'm just pointing out that that is the reality. And the example that Elisabeth brought up, for example, of education to asylum seekers is exactly that. If you want to help asylum seekers get integrated and if you want to equip them so that they fare well even if they are deported, offering them good education the day that they arrive is the right thing to do. But if you want to tell people back home who contemplate traveling to Sweden or to Norway or to Germany that that is not a smart thing because you will have a terrible life there, then intuitively you would think that offering that education is a stupid thing to do. I'm making the dilemma very rough here, but through that example. But I think it's a reality, and if you're thinking politically about those set of issues, many of you are asylum seekers or already have asylum here in Europe. I think this is one thing that is at the heart of the matter that we haven't discussed, and politicians need to deal with that dilemma. And my answer is, make sure that you don't make the choices that make life terrible for those who are already here, because then in fact it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy and we will have citizens who think that we are a terrible place to be and they will not be good citizens. So to the extent I could answer your challenge, Lotte, that would be my answer.
Thank you. Hans, concluding remark.
First of all, I would like to thank you for telling your story here, because I think it's important after these discussions we've had today that we remember that when we talk about refugees, we don't only talk about statistics or figures, we talk about human beings, men and women of flesh and blood. And you are one of those that actually are suffering under the legislations and the policies that we have. And I think Elisabeth showed earlier that there's a total lack of understanding and knowledge, for example, when it comes to the situation in Afghanistan on a general level. But when we come to questions concerning women's situation or the challenge in facing ethnic or religious minorities, we have talked about the Hazara earlier today, then I would say that the understanding and the knowledge is even, the lacking of understanding is even greater. And you have showed that with your story. If I was president for a year, we have a kingdom in this country, prime minister. I would say that if there's one thing I would say to ensure that we have a long-term and untied support for the Afghan people, to education, to healthcare, to human rights, to gender equality, to livelihood all around Afghanistan. Both because I think that would improve the everyday life of the Afghan people, but I also think that we, through a long-term commitment when it comes to development cooperation, can help the Afghan people to build peace in their country. Because it's my strong conviction that nobody is born as Taliban. Nobody is predestinated to become a Daesh fighter. You know, I'm strongly convinced that if we give the youth of Afghanistan the possibility to have education, employment, livelihood, both in the cities and out in the countryside, we will see it will become much more difficult for organizations like Daesh or the Taliban to radicalize the youth of Afghanistan or to recruit future fighters to their ranks.
I'm going to pray that you become Prime Minister.
We will pray that you sit in the White House.
What do you prefer, Swedish government or White House? Ida, what is your solution if you were president or prime minister or EU commissioner? What would be your first thing to do?
Oh dear. It depends on how to put the question. I mean, if just to put the solution or ways of dealing with the refugee situation or ways of dealing with the problems causing the refugee situation. Just because you all said such things that I would like to say, just I could focus more on the refugee part, I think. Just how to solve the imminent situation right now. That's like the first thing we have to do. The first thing we have to realize is responsibility sharing, the situation we have in the world with severe differences in which countries receive refugees, which countries host them, which countries give them any kind of human rights, which countries send them off to offshore centers such as Australia. We have a situation where countries that actually do very little compared to their capacity and their population and their size are saying that they're overwhelmed, that they're overstretched, that their budgets are finished, basically. And then we have countries which are, in fact, overwhelmed, if you want to use that word, which we are encouraging to take in more people or to keep them there. Where we have to start is to realize the responsibility sharing part of this, that this is a global phenomenon, a global problem. Every country is interlinked. We cannot just say that one country that's closer to a country in conflict is more responsible for dealing with the situation than Sweden, Germany, Australia, and any other country. So that's what I would start with, just to try to convey that message and to try to set standards and cooperation for that. Because that's really where we need to start. And right now we're having the opposite developments with states and governments and organizations trying to shift responsibility to other parts and to isolate the problem to certain parts of the world. And that's never going to work. We know that. So that's where I would start, at least.
Thank you, Ida.
Elisabeth, you close up our whole panel.
Oh my God. To my friend from Iranian Kurdistan or Kurdistan, Iran, I think what you are addressing is, in a sense, the importance of group rights. They were more recognized before. There is no other explanation why Afghans 80% could get asylum in 2015 and not in 2016. I mean, there's something with assessment of vulnerable groups. For example, Hazara groups from Afghanistan, which is now turning less than before. And I think the same goes for Kurds. And I don't know to which extent the Norwegian government and other governments are going to be closer to Erdogan in Turkey, for example, with his policy on Kurds, which is horrible. But to recognize that there are vulnerable groups, be they women in particular patriarchal societies, be it sexual minorities, religious or ethnic minorities, is something that is important for politicians like Hans to address. If I were Prime Minister of Norway, I'd stop all the weapons export. Norway is a big weapons exporter. And I would promote dialogues. I spent a great deal of my last 10 years in dialogue with people with whom I don't agree. People who come from the largest Muslim countries in the world, such as Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, but also Tunisia, Iraq, Iran. And I do that because I believe that if we don't try to understand each other and to approach each other, the alternative is that the weapons speak. So there is a connection between cutting down on weapons and enhancing dialogue across borders. Even with what was much easier in 2002 or 2001, even with moderate elements of Taliban, today that is very, very hard, I realize. Very, very hard. But there was a big mistake done when it came to the Bonn Conference way back in 2001, IBD. But dialogue and stopping weapons.
Thank you so much. Now we close up this panel, and a big applause for the panelists.
And for the moderator.
But now I bid the Vice Chairman of FAROE and the previous moderator entering the table and saying thanks to you. And also I believe Dr. Weiss. Oh, okay, that's the Vice Chairman. So, who will conduct it? So please come here. You're invited. I believe that this was the Vice Chairman, no? I'm the chair. You're the chairperson. Okay. So I think we will also need help from what has been said from the audience to end up with this. The overall purpose of this whole day is now to have a sort of message to put forward. So what have we found out today? I have made a tentative list of a few big, small, concrete, abstract things during the day, but we have to help each other out with this. First thing on my list, what you said several times, people who are coming back need to have a skill. Isn't that very concrete? Is that something we can agree upon? To have vocational training both in European countries as well as trying to arrange that in Afghanistan. Is that something we can agree upon? Please take your microphones and say what you like.
I'll be the secretary.
I think that this will be the last choice for us, because and the first time actually we will wish to struggle against the policy of deportation of Afghans, because it is not just, because it is against the UN Convention on Refugees, especially if the refugees are not processed, their asylum application is not processed, then it will be illegal to deport them. But if the asylum process is gone and the asylum application is rejected, then I can accept as a representative of FAROE the choice to give the returnees vocational education and a chance of work and financial means in the country of origin, for example, investment in country of origin to create work for the returnees.
So first of all, stop deportation, and then, if necessary, send back, but both with vocational training and also job opportunities.
Job opportunities.
Yeah, and that goes together with development aid, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So one thing we have agreed upon. What were your main, what did you bring from the first panel as maybe something that we could put down today in final conclusions?
From main panel, I think that the most important thing is that many of those people that came and talk, they work with the government, and I think we have to have some brief it's not just our work to work some things. I think yes, we know that how government work there, but at least we have to take action. Especially, I request more human rights organization to take action, clearly about it, and many other activists that they work with policy, especially Mr. Najafi, that, okay, he worked from the first 2001 until now there, and have been participated of many activities. So I think we have to just select some things or maybe action that could push government to take action about refugees or solve the problem, especially with Iran or maybe Pakistan, because most the problem that refugees has in Afghanistan, at least, it's with Iran and Pakistan.
When you say human rights organizations, do you mean, locally, like in Afghanistan,
in
or
Afghanistan.
do you mean international, like Amnesty International, or?
Sure, I mean general, but especially more Afghanistan, because they are there and they can do some things with government, at least take action. But
I have to ask you then, when you say take action, is that like Ida was saying, pointing out breaches on agreements? Like now you have undersigned this, but you are not doing it. Is that what you mean by taking action?
No. I mean, if we could, for example, list some things, because we have Mr. Najafi and Sovan here, so we can at least give our message to them. That okay, we had this seminar and we came for these points, and it's important to take action with these kind of things, or this kind of agreement that we have. I mean this.
Okay, so support local and international human rights organization. Okay, you gave me a note saying that you had an important question. What was that?
Yeah, this actually from Germany.
You need to have the microphone.
From Germany, I was called by a friend before this conference, and they told you have to talk on minors who are disappeared from Germany and from other European countries, because they came to Europe, they are registered by European states. For example, in Germany, thousands of minors, Afghan minors, are disappeared. Some people think, yeah, they are disappeared and they have gone from one country to another country. But there are also other problems. The human traffickers, the criminals who can take away these boys and girls and misuse them. The European states have to do something about it to make clear where the disappeared minors are. They have in Europe there is a computer system, and they can do it easily, but they should make work of it.
So stop the human traffickers and smugglers and not having all these children disappearing in Europe. That is your issue.
Yes, pay attention to this problem and find it out where these children are, or at least find it out that they are not misused by this.
And that's a police issue mainly, isn't it? Or
that is a police issue mainly.
And that can also be affected by the European Union.
Yes.
Mutual work in Europe.
Yes.
Yeah. So my question now: can we support the proposal to support human rights organization? Are we unified on that one? Yeah. And you put it down already.
I wonder if I could read what I have here.
Yeah.
Because it's,
Let me just check whether we agree. And second, can we also agree on sort of stressing or enhancing the efforts to stop trafficking with human trafficking? Is that a common agreement? Then we have 4 things so far, isn't it? Elisabeth, what have you put down?
This is just something for you to decide on. I'm not a member of FAROE, as you know, but I'm a journalist and a writer, so I write easily. And therefore I've tried to put down now, but also a little bit before, but very much helped by the inputs you made now. A short text which I could read slowly,
But
and
stop,
then you
stop,
could.
stop. We have a number of more things.
Oh, but they could be in it.
Yeah.
Before you know it.
No, wait until we're finished.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, there are more things that have come out during the day. You yourself had a very applauded suggestion: stop to limit or stop weapon exports. Yeah, do we agree on that? I surely agree, and I think the audience agree on that. So that has to be put in the list, isn't it? A world without weapon makes no war and no refugees. That's a root cause. And I think you, Kristian, you really agree with that one. Yes. So that was one thing. And we also, I think that was put also by you, Kristian, legal ways to seek asylum. Legal ways. To open up legal ways to seek asylum instead of stopping them, because then you're a refugee that can have, you are entitled to rights. Now you have no, you stop in nothing, in a vacuum between countries. Do we agree on that one? Open up legal ways to seek asylum in Europe.
I think that in the first time we should stress on application of UN Convention for Refugees, 1951. And,
Article 14.
Article 1 and the rest. But and at the same time, open legal ways for coming to Europe.
Yeah. And especially Article 14 is the one saying that you have the right to seek asylum.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and then we have shortening the time, the administrative time to finalize applications instead of waiting for years and years. That was one of your issues, waiting 6 years. Shortening the administrative time. Isn't that a very obvious one? Yeah, could never be stressed enough. We agree?
Yes.
If you don't agree, you have to say.
I agree.
You agree, really?
Take a lot of time. Many people then don't know how they can do. And the other thing that I want to mention is that
Please take the microphone.
I wanted to mention the Dublin Convention.
Dublin.
So it's not working, I think, due to refugees problem in Europe and many countries they cannot follow that. So how would happen with that? And
revising the Dublin Convention.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it's not working, obviously.
Yes, because many family talk with me, and many of those cases, belongs of Dublin, and they was worried about that okay, they would import to those countries that they came first.
And one thing that was raised from the audience was also trauma treatment and awareness of how badly hurt people are physically and psychologically. So trauma treatment for refugees, isn't that one good thing to put forward?
Yes, especially for minors. Minors are traumatized, and when they disappear, you think they are misused.
No, I'm not even said minors, also the minors, but also the women, because you know that sexuality is a taboo in Afghanistan, and when the woman is a victim of sexual violence and coming and then she would never talk about it. I would need special attention, actually right Dari Pashto translation, and a special treatment for these women, because in this moment, in this 40,000 from Germany and from England and from Europe, other side of Europe, there's lots of women, and that will be very inhuman to send these women back with their trauma.
Positive discrimination, special attention to abused women. That's a hardcore thing as well. Then we have what Ida said towards the end, the urge to, I believe you meant European countries, to really share responsibility, but I think you meant globally as well.
Yes.
All kinds of migration issues are a shared responsibility and should not be put to someone else to solve. So how do we put that more concrete? How can we bash it and how can we really make that effective? Isn't that what's written actually in the UN conventions? It's we have all undersigned. You need a microphone. Help us out.
Well, regarding just shortly on responsibility sharing, it's written in the UN Refugee Convention, in the preamble to the convention. So it's inherent in the convention, and it was thought of even in the beginning when the convention was written in 1951. But it's in the preamble, it's not in any of the articles, and it's not a regulated process that's part of the convention. So that's the problem that we have this idea of responsibility sharing that was agreed upon even in 1951, but it's not written in any article, in any binding article. So that's also something that we have to work on.
So we have to push the UN to make it effective. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, and that means, doesn't it, reinforcing the United Nations once again. Instead of seeing it slowly dying over there, let us put some action into United Nations effectiveness.
Yes, exactly. And also when talking about responsibility sharing, to just remember to always keep in mind the right to seek asylum spontaneously, not to supplement that right with just safe and legal routes, because we always have to remember that if we have a system entirely based on safe and legal routes, that's something that the states will have the whole ability to control, and they will have the ability to select who can travel to what country, and they can choose the quotas, and they can pick people who they want or who they don't want for integration purposes or other reasons. So we always have to keep in mind that safe and legal routes are one way, but we always have to respect the right to seek asylum, and it's no tension. They realize that we have to have this right. We cannot let individual states decide who can travel to which country. We have to have spontaneous right to apply for asylum.
So re-empowering the asylum seeker himself or herself.
Well, yes, and the respect for the right to seek asylum, because that's what we're seeing being put into question right now.
And that has to be reinforced.
Yes.
It's been watered down during these years. Thank you. I think you got all this. You seem to be very efficient. One thing that I need help, or we need to formulate more concrete, is what this panel was very much talking about, namely the need for dialogue, for personal meetings, for having storytelling. How do we meet each other instead of sitting in our separate worlds and separate flats and organizations? How do meetings like this one come about more easily in Europe? How do we meet each other, Europeans and refugees and migrants?
Shouldn't we hear something about encouraging all initiatives of dialogue and get-togethers in the respective European countries? Something like that? I mean, we don't have to go into sort of literary waves of words here if we want to have a short declaration.
If we put it like this, to strengthen the civil society initiatives that really open up for human meetings. Because the civil society is there. We understand that, we heard that, we know that. Ordinary people want to be welcoming, they want to talk to refugees, they want to make friends. How do we strengthen them? So you put it there. And you agree? All of you? Yes? Yes. Now I think we're about to come to the bottom of what has been proposed as far as I have understood. But here we have more proposals. Please come forward.
I have a question. I talk loud. Do you hear me? Yeah. I want to ask you if you can make a revenue, what's the word?
Resume
of this day and send to us who were here.
Dr. Weiss will fix this, what you have been writing. More suggestions?
I like to see that telling a story through the different institutions, both in Afghanistan and different levels. In your small town, and you can find different organizations, music institutions, refugees, painters, footballists, all together. We must work together to achieve telling. Not just telling from Afghanistan, and telling from the country from how, why American come like that. Well, what is different? Afghan people also need storytelling from Western countries. This is, we need to really understand each other and make a global consciousness that local, national, and global level work together. True to human rights.
So arenas and forums for true exchange of views and storytelling. That's one of these things. Yes.
I would like to add something. To reduce the wave of refugee, all of us, we know that we have a lot of problems in Afghanistan. But to leave the country is also not a solution. Yeah. The human traffickers, the agents, they are working so easy and open in Afghanistan. No Afghan in Afghanistan seeing it as a crime. So if we can pressurize the Afghan government to put some control, to do something about the human traffickers there, they have their number. They are sitting in open shops everywhere. They are, motivate you to leave the country. Problems one side, we have a lot of problems. I think in the world, we are Afghanistan the only one country we have the most problem. Security, all the problems. But to leave the country as Afghan, I'm not thinking it's the solution. But to reduce the wave of refugee, Afghan government can do a lot than Turkey or other people. If someone leave the country, any Afghan who live Afghanistan, who is not coming back, who prefer to die but not coming back. It's kind of culture, if you leave, you have to go for it. But if Afghan government put control there to get the agents, the human traffickers there, because it's very normal to do that. It's a business.
To hamper this business. Now, Elisabeth, as a skilled journalist, please read aloud. We have, one second. We have 2 minutes to go. Otherwise, we will overextend the time. And I think people are starting to drop out of the room. We have 2 hands in the room. One here, Soraya, and one there. And then we put end of discussion. Please. And Elisabeth, you're prepared to read aloud. Please.
Okay.
Our commissioner from the Independent Human Rights.
Yes, I think now European Union, I am also a member of that. We established one committee. We are working for human rights defenders under the threat. I think this is very important in this moment to support this mechanism. How European Union can support in defense human rights defender under the threat. Because now when they don't have any place, they have to leave Afghanistan. But Afghanistan needs these people inside. Until now, we have only one house. This is Kabul House. And this is only for women, women rights defenders under the threat, but not for men. For example, some journalists and another. So this is very, very useful if we can have some like shelter, some place, and also support this mechanism. And this is the way that they can stay there for not. We don't have only one.
Yeah, and the last woman.
Thank you. My name is Maria Mazzini. I am from Oslo, Norway. What I want to say is in 3 or 4 short sentences. The first is that please wake up and use your historical memory. And that is something I, as an individual, am asking not only from the governments of the European countries, but also from the
all people, individuals in Europe and in Afghanistan, in all over the world, because the situation in Afghanistan is just as an example from this third world war, which is happening in everywhere in the world. That was not short sentence, very long. But the other is that please do something what humanity needs in the world. And that is not war, it's peace and development.
Sounds like a good preamble.
Thank you.
Well, I try to take responsibility for a text including all these wonderful initiatives, and that is a hard task in itself, Marianne.
But you're skilled.
I've taught journalism for the past 30 years, well, almost, but I don't know if it helps here. But I read now very slowly a text which comes out of what you've all said. And it is not perfect, can't be. But I think the board of the FAROE can make minor amendments afterwards. So it goes like this. The FAROE, Federation of Afghan Refugee Organizations in Europe, assembled in Gothenburg 17 September 2016 to discuss the 2015 wave of Afghan refugees and the crisis in European asylum system, unquote, wants to alert the respective European governments and the UN bodies to the special situation for Afghanistan and EU bodies. Yeah, right. Of course. As we speak. EU bodies to the special situation for Afghanistan and Afghan refugees. While governments increasingly assert that Afghan refugees are baseless and pursue politics to return a majority of the newly arrivals, we beg you to pay attention to the drastically deteriorating security situation in Afghanistan. It is a paradox that while the situation in the provinces is worse than ever in the past 15 years, governments act as if the situation has been improved. Thus, the deportation plans run contrary to the UN Refugee Convention and the fundamental rights to seek asylum, which is currently undermined. Europe needs to open up legal ways to seek asylum in Europe, to limit the risk of death underway to Europe. Thousands of refugees are waiting for months, sometimes years, before their cases are treated by asylum authorities, leading to frustration and traumas. Thousands of minors, out of fear of being deported, have disappeared from asylum homes. Women who have been victims of abuse and sexually based violence need special attention and care, while deportation would be extremely risky. Convention for the welfare of children to make minors less vulnerable, for example, to trafficking, and the return to internal flight, IA to Kabul, can now less than ever before be considered safe. I think this sentence should be moved up. To stem the exodus of refugees, particularly young people from Afghanistan, leaders of nations who are or have been involved in Afghanistan should pursue a politics of peace in the country by financially supporting efforts of reconstruction, providing employment and or education to the young people who today see no hopes for the future. Here, large-scale investments are needed, while all weapons exports should be banned.
Stop. I think it was also said in the morning panel that the coordination between aid agencies should be a lot better than it is now.
I could put that at the end here. Just ask it. I put the keyword. Right. Banned weapons. Where was that? Furthermore, we underline the need for support of initiatives and organizations adhering to human rights and democratic reform, including those who encourage art and literature. Where are you, Farida?
And sports.
And I didn't say sports.
But that was mentioned.
Sports. In a country of storytelling and poetry, which is my very deep experience, by the way. Also at the transnational level. Human rights defenders need special attention and support, also institutional support, because they're especially vulnerable. Second, there's no second here. The large-scale European plans to return tens of thousands of Afghan refugees to the war-ravaged country should be put on hold. Instead, governments and related institutions should provide the refugees with education and skills that will be useful for rebuilding the country, and encourage civil society initiatives that open up for human encounters and dialogue. Joint efforts to fight trafficking and exploitation of refugees are in dire need of support. And if the return policy is pursued in spite of protest, at least the government should see that refugees return with some basic skills that would help their future and Afghanistan. That's the text.
Isn't that terrific? She made an excellent job. Could we leave this text now to FAROE to polish and sort of convey to some, what should we say, some worthy...
But should it be translated also maybe before we...
it should be translated. Now, please, you should free me now from this position and take to conclude this. Who will do that from FAROE? Job is done.
Okay, can we step down? Yeah, but you'll edit that. It's your job to edit.
So this was the conclusion of a mutual work in the room this day.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, it was a successful conference. Thank you.
Engineer Sergey?
Engineer Sergey?
آقای I'm just calling the FAROE Commission here to make a better, what do you call it, give more power to thank you all for being here and sharing your knowledge with us. And they're sitting all here. These are the people who really working for 16 years for FAROE, for Federation of the Refugee and Europe. And I just call them with me because maybe I'm afraid that I can't say thank you enough, especially my Swedish girl from Norwegian, my Afghan fellows, they're coming from Afghanistan. We are so happy. You know what's happened to me, what I hear this discussion, and I just read the news from the last time about against refugee protests. It gives me more hope. We really have hope. What you call, doctor said, that if you don't have hope, you lose it actually. And it gave me so hope that so many scholars from Europe and from beautiful Sweden and Norway and Afghanistan, they still have the guarantee or the, what do you call it, the power to know that we can change the world. There is a crisis, but there is also lots of routes to the solution. And if we really collectively go and I'm going to put this thing away. What do you think about that? I see balance today. I see harmony.
I see Afghans, not Afghans, all of us, we are a team and we are all work together. And I really very appreciate that. And the thing is that we have also people from civil society from Afghanistan. And actually we are all thinking in the same direction. What is missing is really the step forward and action to do more. And I think with this recommendation, what the doctor said, what is the lady? Professor? Yeah, but the one who's putting the recommendation, you! Yes, so, Elisabeth, yes. That was a wonderful job and so short time. This knowledge we really need, this open heart, open mind, open communication, we really need to go forward. And the beautiful stories, this gentleman from, I'm sorry that I don't remember all the names, I'm an old woman, about Parliament and about the thinking of you. I'm sure when you go back, you take a lot to your job. And all of us just take pieces with us and try to change things for a group that really need to be changed for them. Thank you so much. You know, we have a beautiful saying in Afghan. We say برگ سبز است و فی درویش چی کند آشنا امین دارد بینوا همین دارد. Okay, I'm sorry. I want to try. Yeah.
In English, it's a Windows.
I want to translate that. We just have one leaves, and we don't have. We are darwish, we are very poor. I don't have more to give, but it means a lot to give. And with these words, I want to give you some flowers, and also a very nice book that I read myself and I discuss about it from Farida John. Maybe many of you in Sweden and Norway know that, but I don't know if you know that internationally in Afghan people. That is about refugees, and that is actually a book that create the bottom to understand how the refugee lives. Then you can read it back when you're sitting, laying in your bed and you can't sleep, and you can put it pages, and I think it helps a lot. Okay. Okay. Okay, if you put all of them here, we can, yes, kiss, but keep it to me, yeah. Okay. Professor Elisabeth Eide, can I ask you?
Can you talk a little about
You know that? I don't know the topic. Okay. That's a book about Afghanistan, and I want to give you from. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for explaining. Berg, if I say your name good, thank you so much for your beautiful research.
Thank you so
And
much.
so thank you being with your day off here.
But how come you know which Afghanistan books I don't have? Like almost everything there is. This one.
Look, we should integrate on these things. We should call people with which book you don't have. But we can do that if we have a lot of books. You can give me your telephone number. Next time I will do that. Ki? Maşallah Müslüman. You're the. Of course. I have a very nice lunch with him and I learn from him. And thank you so much to be here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We're so happy. Oh, Dr. Rajafi, you make a very big, large doors and with your beautiful analysis. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Berg satt استوفایی درویش چی کند آشنا Oh my, I'm so proud of you and I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Lotta Hedström. Lotta Hedström. Oh my God. You are so good. I was almost jealous of you, you know. And I thought, you know, I'm going to learn a lot how to moderate something. And then at once I saw I'm 60 years, I can't learn anymore. I'm 61. You're 61? No, but you learn a lot. Thank you so much. You did really a wonderful job. Thank you so much. But I heard, of course, before from you, and thank you so much.
Is there long story?
Amnesty International. Thank you so much. I was so amazed by you are from Amnesty because in Netherlands, Amnesty is not so active about refugees. Thank you so much. I hope that you go more and do more about refugees. Oh, how beautiful! You know what I hear from your speech? You are so honest and so open. If you are, I don't say Holland because then I'm judging something. I don't want to judge. I said we have some parliamentarians like you in Holland. That was so good. And at once I forget the face of Wilders. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, with your beautiful contribution, Swaila John, thank you so much. Thank you so much, and very fast and good translation. I'm so proud that people like you here from my country. Thank you so much. Oh, spoil my John. I know. Spoil my John and Nozani. So proud of you. Thank you so much. I just want to say my word. You know the thing is that we have some trouble with somebody to translate. Okay, just hold. And this lady just switch and be the what do you call it, announcer. And I'm so proud of you. If you were in my age, oh my God, you will be more and more and more wonderful. Thank you so much.
I just want to say it's an honor for me to be here with my Afghans and could help today. I will work hardly to go back to Afghanistan one day and help my own countrymen there. But I will start here.
همون دختر نازنین ترجمه اسپرغی جان You know, oh my God, thank you so much. I was so amazed by how can most of the Afghan kids are coming here, they forget the mother tongue, and I don't know how you do that. You're translating, I don't know, your translating was so wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, Dr. Lenya Larson, we had a nice conversation. You helped us so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, Mr. Peter, you know, you did such a big job, but you are not visible here. And we miss you the whole time, and we are not so kind to give you attention. Even I'm going to kiss you. Can I kiss you? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks. Give me some flower. I have more people to thank here. And I'm not living here.
We have no more flowers.
Okay. Okay, then I'm going to borrow some flower for somebody of the, oh no, not from you. Oh my God, thank you so much. I'm going to call Swaila John Jalalzadeh, and I want to thank her because a lots of guests from the Netherlands, they are in her place, and she supports Swaila John. Thank you for everything. Thank you for everything. You know, and we took her husband evening and evening with talking and discussing and Skyping, and this woman never come in the room and say, guys, it is my time, of my kids' time. Thank you so much. And yes, and now the finishing touch was that lots of people last night sleep in her home, and she is a wonderful host. Thank you so much. I think I have somebody. Wait. If I finish, then you can take the microphone and you can do anything that you want. No, I just want to say. Okay. No, just wait. I have to finish it. If I finish, you can have the microphone and you can talk the whole thing. Okay. And then my very, very wonderful friend. Without Weiss, that was not possible. We are so happy, we are so glad what he has done. And this time, the other FAROE people from Netherlands and from other countries, we were not here. And this guy is working and running and organizing, and I think he implement a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful conference. And we are so proud of it. Thank you so much. Wow, I just gave may I give your husband a rose? Thank you so much. And of course, we have done nothing. Of course, our you are here, my love. You know I love this guy. Assalamu alaikum. You know, this people, and especially Mr. Yari, all this, what the pamphlets and thing. I would never forget his contribution to Federation of Afghan Refugees. And guys, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, thank you very, very much. And I'm giving now the microphone to Jalal John, Dr. Said Jalal, and wish you good back home, good journey. And thank you so much.
A photo together with all
Kristian and Ben Kristiansson.
Elisabeth.